So I call this meeting of the Lake Mill City Council for July 18th, 2023 to order. Misty, would you please do a roll call?
Mrs. Bishop?
Here.
Mr. Fields?
Here.
Ms. Quidnow?
Here.
Mr. Waters?
Here.
Ms. Curler?
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, if everyone would please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Before we continue with the agenda, I would just like to make an announcement, some sad news. Our city manager had an unexpected death in the family, so he is not going to be joining us this evening. And on behalf of the council, I want to extend our deepest sympathies to him. So we will move on with the busy schedule that we have this evening. So agenda item number 4 is a correction and/or acceptance of the city council minutes. We have our regular meeting from June 20th and a special work session from June 28th. Did anyone have any comments or corrections on either of those minutes? Okay, hearing none, we'll accept those into the record, and then we'll go on to correspondence. So we didn't have a meeting on the 4th of July, so there was maybe a little more correspondence now to report out. So Mr. Fields, can I start with you?
Sure. Just had the email on the burn ban right after our last meeting. Did receive emails asking if we'd review the dog ordinances, which we'll probably be looking into that. Did receive email on Jefferson County Focus Group. They've got some Taurus focus sessions coming up, and the one on the Joint Rock Lake Committee on our water quality.
Great, thank you. Mrs. Bishop.
Okay, I'm sitting here looking at my emails, and I think I only got the one Mr. Fields mentioned about Joint Rock Lake Committee and their meeting. So I think that's it.
Okay. Mr. Waters.
Sure. It was a long period, but it wasn't too bad. I had correspondence on the Bayberry, the Mill Pond / I guess that's now Parks, the tree lawn policy. Paul Hermanson had some correspondence here recently with City Council. And then there was the 2 feedback forms on the comp plan that was forwarded today.
Ms. Quidnow.
Yes, I had a constituent reach out to me that they were concerned that according to them, about 10 or more days there were no supplies or that there was no cleaning done at the restrooms at Tyrannia Park. I reached out to Eric and we took care of it, and now there is there's been a discussion about the maintenance schedule and what exactly the expectations are. So everything's been taken care of.
Great. Anything else? Okay, thank you. I have a little bit of a list here. Mr. Fields and I received the same constituent email regarding the number of dogs allowed on a residential property. I received an email regarding a proposal for a Lake Mills Entertainment District that Legendary Lake Mills is working on. I received an inquiry from an emergency services provider offering to provide emergency transportation services to the city. Both Mr. Waters and I attended the Joint Rock Lake Committee meeting last week, and there were quite a few citizens who attended who raised concerns about lake levels, particularly waterfront property owners. And then I have been copied on some correspondence since that meeting as the committee is working on the issue. I also received an inquiry from the Rock Lake Improvement Association asking about scheduling a boat tour with city representatives. And then I've had a number of correspondence and conversations about board appointments. So that is my list. Okay, the next item on our agenda is questions and public comments. I'm going to get my little script here. We do have a public hearing tonight on the comprehensive plan. So here's our question and public comment period. The public is encouraged to address the council at this time regarding items on the agenda. If your comments pertain to the public hearing, please hold your comments until that hearing. Public comments may also be made at this time on items that are not on the agenda if you have registered with the city clerk before the meeting has been called to order. The state's open meetings law discourages actions by the council on items that are not listed on the agenda. Please keep your comments limited to 3 minutes and state your name and address when starting your comments, and fill out the sign-in sheet that's provided at the podium. If there's anyone attending online who wishes to comment, please type your name and address in the chat feature. So what I see online looks like staff members only. I don't see any members of the public. But is there anyone here in the room that would like to address the council? Come on up, Wendy.
Hi. I'm Wendy Catalani Davies. I'm the Joint Rock Lake Committee Chairperson. I'm at W8366 Cedar Lane. I'm in the town, but I haven't been to the meeting in a while, and I wanted to address some of the things that have been going on. The Joint Rock Lake Committee is working on the following projects: dogs on beaches, yard waste and snow removal, location for dumping, dredging of the Majala Channel, water levels. The resolution that you sent us is very important, and we started working on that. As you said, our July 13th meeting was overwhelmingly dedicated to the resolution. There was at least 30 people in attendance, and we had presentations from the RLIA. Your city, Eric, was there, the DNR, County Land and Water, and it was very represented, and a lot of people asked a lot of good questions. What I came here today is to talk about the petition that we received. We were given a petition at the meeting, and I'm going to read it. It's very short, take less than a minute. It's a petition, Rock Lake water levels. As riparian owners, we are concerned about low water levels, shifting weather patterns, and our impaired access to Rock Lake. We request the decision-making and managing parties who monitor and manage Rock Lake water levels meet with residents to discuss the analysis of the current and recent water level data and improvement, which will help manage the lake height to the WDNR prescribed summer levels. This should include the assessment of whether the May 2nd operating date will be shifted earlier to capture additional spring precipitation, which could help raise the lake height to current WDNR prescribed summer levels. We would also like to understand the process utilized to manage and report the lake levels. Our goal is to have a public meeting in August, have the city of Lake Mills request the WDNR to review the operating order in September 2023, and the WDNR have their recommendation by March 2024 for implementation in spring 2024. Okay, so that's what it says, and they also sent an email requesting, and I won't read it exactly, but they're requesting that the Joint Rock Lake Committee have a public forum at our August 10th meeting. And since this reads that it was sent to you as a council, do you want us to have that meeting? We're prepared to do it, but I don't want to overstep any issues. And I guess you don't have to answer me, but that's my question. We're preparing for that meeting. On July 24th, the Joint Rock Lake Committee is having a special meeting just dedicated to working on our proposal for this request. And our goal is to have a proposal to the city council in September.
Thank you very much, Wendy. I appreciate that. And I particularly appreciate you being here because I know it's been an item on your committee's agenda to talk about how to maintain communications with the city, since your meeting minutes are kept by the township and we don't always see those. So just thank you for taking the time to come here, and hopefully you can work with our city clerk to get that petition into our city records so that the council has access.
I did give Missy a copy on a thumb drive, so she has that.
Okay, thank you. And I guess just to remind everyone, at our last meeting, we did adopt a resolution and referred the issue of the Rock Lake water levels to your committee, and you're working on it. I know you're scheduling a special meeting so that you can move quickly. We did not specifically ask you to hold a public forum. If you feel like that's something that your committee wants to do as a part of your, preparing a report, I think that would be fine. I'm sure the council will, be soliciting public input at some point on the issue as well, so.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, please.
Wendy, I might have missed this, but how many people signed that petition?
Oh, I don't know, there's 300, I think, some. I didn't count them, but what I've heard is there's about 300 signatures.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so in response to the petition that requests you to do the public meeting, is it, and I don't know, I know this isn't the right forum, but we're happy to do that on the August 10th meeting, so that's okay with you? Or?
I guess I'm not sure if I'm following, but if the petition is asking the council to hold a public forum, I don't know that you're.
It's very unclear.
Yeah, okay.
So I guess what you should do, you have time to read it. I think you have another meeting before then, and maybe you can read the petition. It's kind of unclear to me.
Okay, well, we'll get the petition from our clerk, and then if we need to talk about that at a future meeting and give some direction, we can.
We just don't want to overstep, and we don't want to duplicate an effort, because we kind of had a mini forum at our last meeting.
Okay, thank you so much, Wendy.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Wendy? Okay. Any other public comment tonight? Okay, the next item is the city manager's report, and we have a number of financial documents as well as a monthly police department report. So I see that we have Sam Bell on the line. Does anyone have any questions or comments on any of the financial documents? Mr. Waters.
I thought I was going to have to send Sam an email, but she's here, actually. I noticed on the budget for June 2023 that it looked like the total formulas is off for the total revenue and total expenses. Hopefully we can get that revised for the future. But I do have a question on the capital budget for June 2023. It looks like there's only 9% that's been spent at this point. What does the future look like? Are we planning to spend all that capital budget? What's your thoughts there?
Hi, Greg, Mr. Waters, sorry. Yes, the plans are for the whole capital budget to be spent. We have not started the street project yet, which is the majority of the capital expenditures for the general fund, if that's what you are referring to. And on those percentages that you're seeing on that report, it's not a spreadsheet, it's a report that comes from our current software that was set up by Dynamics. And I'm not sure why those percentages are so far out of whack. If you look at the year-to-date versus the budget, we're pretty much on schedule with the budget. Our new software that we're implementing within the next month will give a much better report for the council members.
Fantastic, thank you.
You're welcome.
Just one thing to add on Sam's comments. Please note that the 1.7 million on the last item affects that 9% dramatically. And of course, at this point, there is not a project there.
Thank you.
I just wanted to highlight a couple things from some of the documents. In the general fund, I noticed in the check register a large number of reimbursements for lead service line replacement, so that's really good to see that a lot of residents are taking advantage of that program and the reimbursement that we can get through the state. In the police report, I thought there was a number of things that were worth highlighting. The annual Night Out Against Crime is always a nice event that they do. We have some new community service officers that are going to be able to address minor violations, particularly at our parks. So I think that's a nice thing that we're going to be able to add. And it was a bit disappointing to read about property damage on the new Legendary Lane. So glad that folks are working to try to address that. Any other comments on any of the manager's report items? Okay. All right, so the next item, number 8, is we have some council member board reports and acceptance of minutes from the Joint Review Board for June 22nd, the Plan Commission from April 25th, and the Public Works Board from May 9th. Does anyone have any comments or want to share any additional information about those minutes?
All good, except that was June 22nd, 2022, that you might have said that, but that's a long time ago.
Oh, well, yes, I think the Joint Board of Review meets once a year, correct? So they probably just approved their minutes from last year. Is that why that is from a year ago? Okay. And that's a review board. Dan, maybe you can remind us what they do. There's not a council member on that board.
No, the Joint Review Board is a group of taxing entities that come in and review.
Attorney Drescher, could you speak into the microphone?
Yeah, sorry, Misty, thank you.
Yeah.
The Joint Review Board is a board of representatives of different taxing entities that meet and review like our TIDs and stuff like that. They meet once a year to make sure that certain plans are in compliance, and then they'll meet for specific purposes as needed.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments on the minutes? Okay, seeing none, we'll accept all of those into the record. And then we'll move on to agenda item 9, which is council business. If there are no objections, I would like to move up a couple of items briefly. So I'd like to move up letter H, which is the recognition of the Lake Mills EMS, and to take that one next. And then, let me find my, and then to be followed by item C, which is the confirmation of the Parks Board Chair. Is any objection to those rearrangements?
Nope.
Okay, thank you. All right, let me get to this one. So, Mr. Drescher, remind me, is it appropriate to read the recognition first and then have a motion for approval? Okay, that's what we'll do. So we have a City Council Resolution number 23-48 that I will read out loud. And this is recognizing the Lake Mills EMS 49 years of service to the community. Put my glasses on here. Whereas the Lake Mills EMS was founded on February 16, 1974, and continuously provided emergency medical service without interruption to the city of Lake Mills and the surrounding areas through June 30th of 2023. And whereas the Lake Mills EMS and its members have been an integral piece of the city's public safety community, and whereas in addition to medical care, Lake Mills EMS has consistently served the Lake Mills community for 49 years through community service initiatives, and whereas the city is grateful to past and present members of Lake Mills EMS who dedicated their time and expertise in service to the community and its residents, and whereas the positive contributions of Lake Mills EMS and its members to the City of Lake Mills residents, businesses, and visitors cannot be overstated. Now, therefore, be it resolved this 18th day of July 2023 that the City of Lake Mills City Council thanks the Lake Mills EMS for its service to the community and expresses gratitude to all of its members, past and present. And we have Tom Murphy and Jim Colgrove here from the Lake Mills EMS, and I would ask that first we could give a round of applause to recognize the EMS. Are there any council members that would like to share a personal word of thanks?
Can we move on the motion first?
Oh, yes, please.
All right.
Sorry, yes, can I get a motion to approve that? The
Move to
resolution?
approve City Council Resolution 23-48, recognizing Lake Mills EMS 49 years of service to the community.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Waters, second by Ms. Quidnow. All in favor of City Council Resolution 23-48, please signify by raising your hands. Okay, that's a 5-0. So having completed that, is there anyone that would like to share a personal comment? Mr. Fields?
Okay. No, I'd just like to say thank you to all the EMS folks and all the volunteers who came before us, and thank you for allowing me to serve with you guys also. It's been fun for me the last 9 years.
Wonderful. Mr. Waters?
Yeah, I think as far as EMS people here today, I think Tom, Jim, and Steve are the representatives. I'm not sure if there's anyone else, but thank you to the whole community. Is there another one?
Yeah.
Did I say?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. I'm sorry. I meant to say Jim. But thank you to all of EMS. I know that my family's had to use the services over the years, and it would have been a huge bind without that service available to the community. And I know the whole community is appreciative of the service that's been provided over those 49 years. So thank you for the work that you've done and what you continue to do for the community of Lake Mills.
Mrs. Bishop?
Sure. Just thank you, gentlemen, and to everybody who I know served. This is a volunteer service. I've seen nothing but an outpouring of support for Lake Mills EMS and the work that they've done in this community. So thank you, everyone.
I'm going to take a quick break and give a
Can I say
handshake of
something real
congratulations.
quick?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I didn't recognize you, Ms. Quidnow.
It's okay. I was hiding over here in the corner. Personally, my immediate family, my husband and my children have never been able to experience the Lake Mills EMS. Is that a good thing? I think so. But even if it was something that we could utilize, I know that I would be in good hands. And I can speak for my grandmother and grandfather and all my aunts and uncles and cousins who live here, that they have been more than happy with the services that you've provided. So we thank you so very much for keeping our community in great hands. Okay,
All right, thank you. With that, I will just do a quick handshake.
Do we need to suspend?
Hi, Jim Colgrove, W8021 Park Lane Road, Lake Mills EMS Vice President. Thank you so much for this recognition. I just want to say that it has been an honor for all of us to serve you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, in our rearranged agenda now, we'll move on to item C, which is confirmation of the City Council President's appointment of Tim Sprecher as the Parks Board Chair. So just a little background here. We recently confirmed Bill Olgathidis as continuing to serve as the chair, but he recently had to step down from that role due to some increased business travel. So I do want to thank Bill for his service, and Tim is the next longest serving member on the board, and Tim is here tonight if anyone has a question for him or wants to meet him. But I've spoken with Tim and Eric, and Tim is looking forward to stepping into this role as the Parks Board Chair. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Okay, then I'll just be looking for a motion to confirm the appointment of Tim Sprecher as the Parks Board Chair.
I move to confirm the appointment of Tim Sprecher as Parks Board Chair.
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Mrs. Bishop, second by Mr. Fields. Any discussion? Okay, Can we just have a hand vote? All in favor, raise your hand, please. Okay, that's 5-0. Congratulations, Mr. Sprecher, and thank you for being willing to serve. You can wave so the council members can see you. Okay.
Is that outside?
What is that? Must be outside. Yeah, must be outside. It's very loud. Okay, so now we will go back to item A under council business, which is the public hearing for the City of Lake Mills 2040 Comprehensive Plan. So in the documents that were with the council's packet, we have a copy of the public notice that was issued on June 15th. So that's a little more than 30 days ago. And so that gave a notice of tonight's public hearing and the opportunity for people to comment on the comprehensive plan. And our next agenda item actually has the copies of the plan that were available for the public. We also received 2 written public comments today that have been added to our packets online, and I think we also all received those by email from Ann Werner and Bruce Johnson, so we can take a look at those. So at this time, we'll open a public hearing for anyone else who wishes to make a comment on the City of Lake Mills 2040 Comprehensive Plan. You can come up to the podium, sign in, and let us know if you'd like to say something.
Good evening. I'm Carol Burrows. I live at 169 West Lake Park Place. I'm sorry I didn't put something written down that you could have for your permanent entries. And I realized after I went back over the plan today, late afternoon actually, that it had a place that you could submit a written form. And I just had not caught that. But one thing that I was a little annoyed at when I did catch it was the fact that I'm here to speak for the seniors of Lake Mills, for any of the older adults for Lake Mills, many of them who do not have a computer or are computer savvy to use their cell phone for that. I was just disappointed when I read the comprehensive plan that after the focus group that I had participated in, when both Dustin and Brian were gathering information for what was to happen in the future, nothing was mentioned in the comprehensive plan that I felt that we had really stressed. I realized everybody in this community has something they want, something they feel is more important than somebody else's. However, I think that we have been able to prove that there is a real need for a social gathering for the older adults of our community. It seems that the seniors are kind of left out of things that are done, that are purposely planned for. We do have a Club 55 Senior Center going now that is under the rec department of the school district. However, we need a larger space. We need a multi-age community center that would be for all ages. And I did not see anything in the comprehensive plan that specifically said that. We did get, I did notice a lot when I looked under, I think the heading was facilities, and all of the parks are listed, which are wonderful. We are a very lucky community to have those parks. But for the most part, we cannot count on those for some older adults to be able to walk through the park or use it on a daily basis. And by that I mean there's all kinds of other social things that are very important for all of us, really. It's to help with both physical and mental health. Isolation of seniors is something that I think most people don't even realize. And so I just didn't see that. And I know that we also need a venue in Lake Mills. And yes, that is not necessarily up to our city to provide that. But if there is a reception, a wedding reception, an event, we really have no place to go. There's just nothing. And I don't know the answer, but I think that if we don't plan for it, it may never occur. Thank you. There's not a pen up here. Oh, wait, there's one.
Did you find one? Okay, thank you, Mrs. Burrows. Does anyone have any questions for Carol Burrows? Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us tonight. Is there anyone else who wishes to comment on the proposed update to the Lake Mills Comprehensive Plan? I don't see anybody else online. Just ask one more time, is there anyone else who would like to make a public comment on the comprehensive plan update?
And if Ms. Warner and Mr. Johnson are here, they can comment as well, right?
Yes, I asked Ms. Warner and she did not want to speak, but we do have her written comment, so thank you very much for that. Okay, I will close this public hearing at this time, and we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is a discussion of the proposed update to the comprehensive plan. So we've got a number of documents that we've had the opportunity to review. We have a presentation, a PowerPoint presentation from our planning consultant that they will walk through with us in a moment. We have the draft plan and maps, an executive summary of the plan, a set of appendices of the plan. We have the signed resolution from the Plan Commission recommending that we adopt the plan. And last but not least, we have a memo from our attorney regarding the remaining process steps and the authority for the council. So why don't we start out with Dustin and the team from our consulting planner to just walk us through, give us a summary of what we're looking at tonight.
I got a quick question, Dustin.
Yes.
You're online as well. You're in two places?
It's so I can present.
Okay. All right. Just checking.
Places at one time.
If you can bear with me just a moment. I'm used to sitting to do all this. Well, thank you for the opportunity to present to you. Again, my name is Dustin Wolf. I'm your consulting planner. With me tonight are Brian Carranza, who you've seen at numerous meetings, one of our landscape architects, and then Mike Lewis, somebody who's behind the scenes putting a lot of the content together as well. So I just wanted to make sure that you saw that I'm not alone, and even when you only see one of us at a meeting, there's certainly others that are involved. The presentation that we've provided and that's available online, I'll say is rather lengthy, and it is not my intention to walk through this point by point. It's really there for the edification of people in the audience to kind of get a good summary of what the plan process was, et cetera. I'm going to hit a few high points. Of course, if there's things you would like me to go into more detail on or for Brian to provide more context on, we will gladly do so, but we respect the agenda you have tonight and not being too verbose. The comprehensive plan update was an update to the plan that was most recently updated in 2009. Generally, we intended to update these every 10 years. We ran into a little bit of a mishap worldwide with COVID and felt that was a poor time to try to update a comprehensive plan. So it got pushed back a little bit into kind of a 14-year delay or update. But why do we do the comprehensive plan? It's really intended to be a roadmap for decision-making for the community, right? It is intended to be updated every 10 years because things change. Your residents change, some get older, some get younger, the needs and the priorities of the community change. It isn't intended to drill down into too much detail and into any one thing. And you will see that through the plan document where it references other very specific plans you have related to utilities and infrastructure and parks and open space and the like, your strategic plan that you undertake as a council. But it is intended to be a roadmap for decision-making, so your residents can understand where, that your values and character are maintained, and that the decisions that the community are going to make are consistent with other long-range planning documents or codes and ordinances that you have. It's also important to gain public input on this, not just the planning process, but what those priorities are. A brief slide on kind of the process we've undertaken. Really started this in January of last year. This process was spearheaded by a public involvement plan, which is included in some of the plan documents you have. That is a statutory requirement, but it's in essence saying, how are we going to engage the public through this process? That was both reviewed by the Plan Commission and the Council and ultimately adopted by both, and it walks through those mechanisms that we were undertaking, and I'll talk about them in a little more detail. Plan Commission worked very diligently on the content and direction of the plan. That took a fair amount of time over the past year-ish. It was also undertaken while they were undertaking regular business of the Plan Commission. So there were some meetings over the last year where just regular community business kind of trumped the planning process. So it did kind of lengthen the process a bit rather than adding special meetings and such. Ultimately, the Plan Commission did make their recommendation in May, and we've just finished the open book period that you referenced, and we have obviously a hearing tonight. So the public involvement plan really outlined how we were going to engage residents here. There were engagement of the community staff here, some questionnaires to the Plan Commission and to the Council about a variety of issues within the community. There was an online survey that was provided, which had a very good response rate. Focus groups that were developed by the initial listing of focus groups to engage was started by the previous city manager, and then it was vetted by the Plan Commission and expanded by the Plan Commission to the groups that we had. So local businesses, civic organizations, developers, environmental groups, intergovernmental agencies, et cetera. Again, our open comment period and our public hearing process. Public was always asked to come to meetings. Sometimes it's a bit challenging, so we always made sure that they were invited to provide comment online through a comment form or merely just reaching out to city staff or elected and appointed officials. Sorry, there we go. So what did we hear? And I'm going to just touch on a handful of things. Again, on natural and cultural resources, the value, the importance, the priority of protecting the lake. Not just the lake, of course, but really that is the focal point here, but all of your environmental features. Broad support for multi-use trails. Community events are important to our residents, and what makes this a great place to live. So the quality of life here is important to them, but prioritizing preservation of environmental features, and we certainly heard from the Rock Lake Improvement Association a little earlier tonight, engaging them on those important resources. Land use, retaining the community character. Everybody identifies with the historic character of downtown, retaining that and making decisions that enhance that character, and getting back to traditional neighborhood development pattern for how we grow as a community in the future. Focusing on infill development underutilized properties. The community survey certainly asked a lot about that, but there are priorities to the community that's where we should be focusing on before we grow outward too much. Utilities and community facilities. Concern about the cost of utilities in relation to future needs. Certainly a lot of discussion about the wastewater treatment plan over the last couple of years. I'll say departure from the past plan. The public would like to see newly established neighborhoods with community parks within them. That is a pivot from what was a kind of a planned direction in the past, where trying to minimize, I'll say, not have many small parks, because they certainly do take a lot of resources to maintain, but newer residents have this expectation of having parks within their development. Another issue is, and this was kind of throughout every section of the document, hearing from the public about communication, hearing from the focus groups about communication, more engagement of the community on a regular basis on decision-making. This one talks really about utilities and community facilities, but it was across all of the key elements of the plan. People want to be engaged. They want to know who to talk to. They want to be comfortable coming in or knowing who to talk to face to face. And so you'll see that throughout the plan document as you review it. Public told us more pedestrian connectivity, more sidewalks, more bike paths, more connection between neighborhoods, more connection to civic destinations, more connections to downtown. And that the roadway network is fine, but the bike and pedestrian network really isn't great for everybody. And they have an expectation, they were telling us, that it is easier for them to use. So that's going to be an important conversation topic for Public Works Board, Plan Commission, obviously the council. Housing in neighborhoods was obviously a big concern. Cost of housing, availability of housing is a concern. Housing mix, that there aren't certain housing products that people would like to see within the community. So the housing chapter, and we'll talk a little bit more, goes into a lot of detail about that. But you can see encouraging more housing types rather than just a single-family housing product. So on the housing side, we asked residents about what was important to them, what they expected, and we asked, how should it look and feel to them? So we had this kind of visual preference survey in there. High quality standards, that's an expectation within the community. And we've shown some character for some single family attached housing that was in the survey. It's kind of the big pictures in the middle. On the right is a recent development, the Drumlin Crossing. So you can see that through the codes and ordinances the community already has, you're getting that kind of product, but they want to see more of it within the community. So those are actual pictures of constructed projects on the right. Single-family attached and two-family products that should integrate within existing neighborhoods. So you can see from the visual preference survey, people like the look of that historic character housing. So I'd like to see more of that on the infill, right? Our newer subdivisions, Tyrannita Point on the south end, Brookstone have a different feel, but when we're talking about the prioritization of infill is getting this type of housing product within the community. Multifamily housing, the improved character of multifamily has been important. The codes and ordinances that are on the books have resulted in the developments that you're seeing on the bottom is the new Summer Ridge development. So really aligning with the expectation of the public. I'd say that's the new bar to be set for multifamily housing within the community. There wasn't really an opposition to specific multifamily housing. They don't like things that are too large in the number of units, but they do expect it to have high quality character and building materials. Downtown, obviously, is a big concern. The former Century site, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But what should housing and character development look like downtown? You can see they want mixed use, that they're not necessarily opposed to 3 or 4 story, but it does come back to the character. They want first floor commercial wherever practical. They want, I'll say, quaint character elements that align with the historic character of downtown. What did we hear on economic development? Prioritizing redevelopment of underutilized sites. Carpaco and Century bubbled up most notably. Downtown needs more restaurants and more retail options. The downtown businesses would like to see a downtown master plan specific developed for outlining kind of the future of how that resource is going to be enhanced over the years, how streetscaping, hardscaping will be improved over the years. They want to be involved with the development of that plan, so it aligns with what your business owners are thinking as well. The last item here on economic development is please poll businesses, please poll residents about things in the community on a regular basis. One of the things we heard in the survey was, don't just ask us one time a lot of questions, ask us more often minimal number of questions to get feedback on issues that are important to the community, so that to help the council kind of have a finger on the pulse of what they're thinking. Yes, ma'am.
How did they specify they wanted that poll done? Did they want to have a public hearing, or did they want to have email? I mean, was there any kind of indication as to how that was going to be done?
Social media, we did ask a lot of questions in the community survey. It is certainly provided as an appendices to this plan, but it is, how do you want to be engaged? Social media is the most notable way that people want to be engaged. Coming down to meetings is not high priority. They would love to see more at community events, that there are, let's say, like staff available, or a city kiosk at community events about kind of what's going on, or, meet your new public works director, that type of stuff. But most notably, it was just the social media elements that are out there. And they certainly do use the website, so making sure that that has information available to it. There's no silver bullet here. I think just the takeaway is they want to be talked to more. Some of the demographic trends, looking at growth of about 1% a year over the next 20 years, and that's how you've historically grown. So I'll say a very manageable growth rate, steadily marching upward, but really enables you to plan well for it. We followed the historic compounded growth rate after evaluation with the Plan Commission. Some of the demographics that have changed, median age has increased over the last 30 years, modestly. You're seeing, it's increased by about 2.5 years. But the percentage of residents over 65 has decreased 2.5%, right? So it's a curious number to see. Current percentage of school-aged children is 27% of your entire community. That's the second highest among your surrounding communities. So what does that tell you? Over the next 10 years, school-aged children are going to be young adults, right? Their wants and needs within the community are going to be different than people who are over the age of 60, right? So again, probably need to gauge them a bit more over the next few years. A little bit on educational attainment. You're really kind of in line with everybody else. Again, there's a lot of info in here for people to kind of digest on their own. A bit on median household income. You're right in line with kind of the neighboring communities. You'll find that towns typically have a little higher median household incomes than most cities or villages. Housing characteristics, total number of housing units, but the 2020 median housing value of $200,000 is higher than most of your peer communities, but again, when you get into the rural areas, they just seem to have larger houses that have a little more value. Not surprising around the state of Wisconsin. Housing is similarly priced to what you're seeing around Jefferson County, so there's no outliers there. Lake properties aside, of course. Housing construction, you can just see kind of the breakdown. Most of your housing construction is predominantly single family. Two-family has declined. The number of two-family units has declined. And I think that's one of the issues that needs to be addressed in the coming years, to start talking about the missing middle and diversity of housing products. Recent median home price is $262,000. That's an 11% change from the, yes, I'm sorry, Mr. Waters.
Can we go back?
Yeah.
Can we go back to, that 2020? I noticed there's a big increase in mobile homes. What's that all about?
You have a number of mobile home parks in the community, and not all of the units were built out initially, so people are coming in and pulling permits for them or replacing older units. Right, so there's 3 top of my head that are within the community and a couple more that are around you. So you are kind of a tourist destination. You have a pretty high seasonal, because you don't really allow overnight, you don't allow year-round in some of your mobile home parks, but people are reinvesting in them. So you're seeing permits being pulled for that.
So that's basically infill?
I would call it infill, but it's, again, so you take one of the older mobile home parks off of Ferry, and they, old units from the 60s or 70s have been replaced with new units, so that's a new permit. And there's a couple of areas where there's the ability to add some units yet. So there's some vacant sites, so they have added.
Okay, thank you.
A little bit on employment projections, kind of going into 2030. Increase in employment overall, decrease in farm sector, things that probably aren't surprising to you. Service-oriented jobs are expected to increase. This is very typical in Wisconsin. So what does the plan propose? Agriculture, really just preserving growth areas for you. Natural resource goal is to preserve your important assets, to preserve your sensitive areas. Codes and ordinances are doing that well, but there are always issues on the shoreline, as I'm sure you're aware, making sure that we're staying ahead of those. Cultural resource, preserving the heritage of this community is a priority, which, especially as you have redevelopment opportunities in the downtown, holding them to a high standard, holding them to high expectation. So enforcing the downtown design guidelines and codes and ordinances. They are on the books and they work because they do require you to meet kind of the character of turn-of-the-century development that you have there. But sometimes that can be challenging when someone comes in because you're asking to do more, right? Sometimes it's not always desired, but your residents have said, preserve the character of downtown. The history of downtown is important. So we need to make sure over the next 10 years, as redevelopment is occurring, that you are holding developers to that high standard. More interaction with your historic advocacy groups. We have historic, locally significant districts defined, but you don't have formal districts on the books where there are specific requirements in neighborhoods. And so that is something to be explored over the next few years. You have many properties and districts that are eligible to be National Register. It is something to look at moving forward. On land use, again, providing a variety of land uses to meet the needs of this community. The growth plan is very modest and hasn't changed dramatically from what was the previous plan. We'll talk about that in a second. We do need, about 140 odd acres over the planning horizons over the next 20 years for new development. That really isn't that much. That is a very modest growth projection. That's using a units per acre of about 4 units an acre, so quarter acre sizes. But depending upon how you focus on infill development, your infill development areas could have a little higher density than that. Yes, Ms. Quinn.
With regard to the residential land use, I noted that we've had 2 people in the public explain that they were looking at why there wasn't more senior, facilities. And in terms of like a 55 and older types of residences with a senior center attached to it, is that something that is just not within our feasibility, or is that something that, can you explain a little bit more about why that wasn't addressed?
Okay, so I'm going to flip to the plan. I'm hoping you can see this. So we absolutely heard from Club 55 and others about the senior center, and there are absolutely statements in this document about the importance. This is on page 5-10. It's one of a few references in there. Sometimes they got couched in civic organizations discussions, but this one is about providing a community center for all ages as a priority, that the city should evaluate funding models for supporting community centers like the Rock Lake Activity Center, and you should evaluate the types of activities and services a community center should provide and that are desired by the community. So I think one of the challenges of acting like this is there's a lot in there, because there's a lot of things that the community is grappling with. And yes, there are a lot of competing priorities, and that is certainly something the council will have to engage with. But yes, this is one place where it's in there. So I would say yes, those statements are in there. But when this is a 5,000 foot level plan, the boots on the ground portion means probably a little more study on some of these things. And I know that the city has studied issues with the Rock Lake Activity Center specifically, and the relationship with the school district on it, but who's responsible for what? How are you paying for it? What programming, right? Those are bigger questions than we can really get into in a comprehensive plan. So sometimes the plan is a plan to plan in certain places, right? And and the implementation chapter of this talks about some of the key priorities within the community, who the champions are, and who are their support for that. And this is one of those areas.
Thank you.
I hope that answers your question.
It does.
And I do appreciate the statement being made, because we're excited when we can go back and point at, we've heard you, and we want to make sure that people know that we heard you.
Okay.
So this graphic is just showing you from the land use map kind of those growth areas. The obvious one is the north side, and then there's a northwest, south side growth, which you've seen with Tyranny and Appointing heading down 89, you're seeing, and then kind of south of Brookstone. The goal for many of these areas is kind of what we call planned neighborhood development. This is a carryover from the previous plan as well. It is trying to encourage a variety of housing types within developments, right? That you can, instead of having to crisscross the community to find the housing product you need, you can have it within your community. So you would have single family and two family, could be 3 and 4 families, also with multifamily, integrated into an area for development. One of the challenges with that is, of course, some developers only have a single family product and they don't have a multifamily product. So as areas start developing, you're going to be looking at them with a little more scrutiny as to, okay, if this is where the single family is going, how are we handling these other housing products that we need? And trying to make sure people can stay within their neighborhood to meet their housing needs. Encouraging senior housing in certain areas. Encouraging maybe zero lot line, because not everybody wants to maintain a lawn. Not everybody wants that. Some people do want an apartment product. Some people do want a rental product. And for a certain point in their life, right? You're younger, you're trying to attract young people back to the community or to stay in the community. They're not always ready to buy a house yet. And then people are looking to divest themselves of a single-family house, want less responsibility, but still want to stay with their neighbors. So we spent a lot of time on this, looking at Ms. Bishop and her time on the Plan Commission, spent a lot of time talking about housing issues. But this is one of the ways to make that happen. You get a diversity of ages and incomes within a neighborhood, and you can buy up and down within a neighborhood. But it's going to take some coordination working with the development community. The north side plan, again, is generally that area around the interchange at 89 and north of the interstate, right? This is an area that has been planned for a number of years. It's most specifically in the TID 7 development plan. There are utility issues up there. You need to cross the interstate. But there are details on this within the plan for future employment areas, future commercial areas, and then, of course, residential up there, ease of access, et cetera. The kind of south side planning area is the area, as I mentioned, going down 89, south of the Glacial Drumlin Trail. You've seen the start of that with the Tyranny and Point development, but continuing that forward. This area just never grew earlier because of the utilities. We had to wait until the reconstruction of 89 and the significant investment the city made in utilities, and you're seeing that come to fruition. And that's also an area where TID 5 is, which has helped with infrastructure improvements to make some of these developments happen. East side planning area is south of Brookstone generally. This is an area that kind of goes eastward towards Harvey Road. Again, a logical extension of neighborhoods in that area. There's a fair amount of wetlands as you start going south towards where the trail starts curving south. So development will probably have a different feel there because of the ecological features. Transitioning over to transportation, what does the plan propose on transportation? A lot of discussion on transportation network issues, right? At the end of the day, kind of decision, the recommendation coming from the Plan Commission was we need to identify our key routes for roadway carriers, but there are some very important plans that need some updating within the community, and then we're listing those. The long-range transportation plan, the bicycle plan, and the sidewalk plan, all were last updated in 2006. So this plan really makes a recommendation to focus on updating those plans. That's the boots on the ground level evaluation, kind of the street by street. Mr. Watersville, you're going to say something? No?
Did you want me to fill
If you have something you would like to add, yes, I'm all ears.
I wasn't planning.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, I just thought.
It was an expectation that you wanted me
No, I'm sorry. I just trying not to, trying to.
to know some what you were saying.
Okay.
Dustin, I have one question. Did you say the long-range transportation plan was updated in 2006 or 2016?
2006 is what we have.
Okay.
Yes. So it is time for those detailed documents to be updated.
Okay, I'll go ahead and say something then.
Yes, sir.
So back in 2006, it identified routes, the bicycle plan identified routes for near-term bicycle paths and on-road improvements. So some of that happened and some of it did not, I take it, based on what I've read?
Yes, that is correct. The recommendation that came from the Plan Commission did not highlight the specific network for, I'll say, key bike routes, right? You do have a policy of sidewalks, so that doesn't change, but where and how should bicycle facilities be integrated? This plan does talk about potentially looking at a bike boulevard, which would be taking kind of one of the through streets. That's I'll say a lower traffic carrier, but does have continuity through the community, and focusing improvements in that area that really make it amenable to bicycles. Now, it would be available to put cars, but it really is to highlight that bicycles really should use this route to cross the community, that travel speeds for vehicles would be much lower because it's expected to be kind of an on-street bicycle route through the community. You're not looking at every street having a certain higher level of improvements to make it more amenable to bicycles, right? Certain intersection improvements, things to slow vehicle traffic down, but it would be expected that bicycles would be in travel lanes on a route. So that is something that this plan recommends to be explored. This is becoming very common in small and moderate-sized communities. Certainly very common in large communities, like a Madison has done it, but you're seeing it in communities that are in the 6,000 to 15,000 person range to say this is how we are going to focus our energy, because you can't make every street the most bicycle-friendly street. You have limited resources, so let's pick those couple routes that cross the community. Yes, sir.
So I did notice in the original draft, it did outline the streets and it included the bicycle map. That was pulled out of the draft that City Council received and was approved by the Planning Commission, even though the community overwhelmingly requested bicycle facilities within the city.
Yes, after discussion at the Plan Commission level, the Plan Commission decided that those elements should be removed, and the draft that was recommended is the one that you see before you.
So no further comment?
Well, we do take our direction from the Plan Commission on this. We are kind of scribes at time, putting pen to paper, and I'll say the Plan Commission felt that focusing on the update to the those three plans would be the priority. To determining on a block by block.
Quick follow-up, would, when we go after grant funds, I read somewhere in here that it's important to be included in the comprehensive plan. Would that hold true with bicycles as well?
Yes, it does. It is always helpful to reiterate in your master plan what those routes are. having other documents such as detailed plans like the three highlighted here certainly would assist with that. The Plan Commission felt that the Public Works Board should be more involved, and I'm looking at Ms. Bishop. Public Works Board should be certainly more involved in determining which routes are the best routes, more engagement perhaps of the public on which routes would be best routes, aligning it a little more with the capital improvement program that you have. So, but it certainly, from a planner perspective, we would certainly like to have it in there, but I would say that you would also be covered with I'll say the general approach that is taken here to talk about specific plans being updated that really get to boots on the ground.
I think Dustin summarized that well. Just to step in briefly and reiterate some of the conversation. I think our discussion at Plan Commission was that we didn't want to get into the minutia of choosing roads to be bike boulevards, for instance, when that wasn't the focus of getting the comprehensive plan itself done. We thought, like Mr. Wolf mentioned, the Public Works Board could have more insight, that there was more public discussion that would need to be involved specifically for bike routes and plans, and that reference to updating the plans that are listed here was more optimal in the scope of the comprehensive plan, and then making sure that those smaller plans, such as a long-range transportation plan, was actually updated as it should be, and that more thought was given to that document. So I hope that summarizes the Plan Commission's discussions appropriately. Mr. Wolf, I appreciate also your recitation of that.
Thank you.
And one more comment. I note that on page 99 of the plan with maps, there's quite a few references to bicycles and walking and multi-use paths and on-road bicycle facilities. So while it may not be specific, like you were saying, Ms. Bishop, with the minutia of which road is what, it does reference it. Would that be enough information to provide for grant applications, with it being mentioned as it is?
Yeah, I think in partnership with these detailed plans, I think yes. Yes, it would be. Like, the comprehensive plan, I think, does an effective job of reiterating how important the public feels about this, and that they were engaged, and I think their expectations are well documented in here. The Plan Commission's approach was, let's update these other plans to be the boots on the ground of evaluating specific routes for topography, traffic, volumes, et cetera. So
I think we'll have a city council discussion later, right?
Yes, we can
I
discuss
understand.
this more for sure, but I mean, as long as Dustin's okay with it, I think it's good to ask questions as they come up.
Absolutely, absolutely. We have someone there taking copious notes for all of this. With that, is it okay if I continue on, or is there more here? I don't want to stifle discussion. Again, in utilities, community facilities, you have a comprehensive outdoor rec plan that goes into a fair amount of detail, so this references things coming out of that. That document is updated every 5 years, so you are eligible for grant monies through the DNR and others. Again, reiterating, the public has told us they would like to see parks in new neighborhoods, and so again, that is a pivot from previous direction from the last plan. On the public utilities, it has general conversation about, selecting a preferred site for a new wastewater treatment plant, because that certainly does impact growth and development in certain areas. Again, discussion on ensuring emergency services are provided. You can see the last bullet on the left side, evaluating funding models again for supporting the community centers and activity needs of the community of all ages. Housing neighborhood development, prioritizing workforce housing, enabling ownership of varying housing types, and providing a housing product that meets the needs of people who desire to live in the community or people who work in the community that can't live in the community. There's no silver bullet to this. So we do talk in detail of the plan about kind of approaches for this, missing middle, public-private partnerships. The city over the last couple of years, has evaluated some land that it has across the street from Wallace Park, and that hasn't been high priority industrial park land, meaning that there's some wetlands and some things on it that just have not led to it being developed that way. This was one iteration that was evaluated as staff in a previous council level about what could be done there. We did keep TID number 2 open one more year, which was the industrial park TID. There are monies that are available that are on the books for using for workforce housing products. We've been talking to developers about that. This is something that the plan highlights that the city council should re-engage in about. Is this an approach to look at, or should they look at other approaches for meeting this workforce housing need in the community? Again, continue to enforce the multifamily design standards. And again, you can see kind of from the graphic of what those expectations are. Those have been codified in the zoning code update that was done a few years ago. And you can see the product that's coming out of that's the Summer Ridge development. So focusing on continuing to do that, which can be challenging, right? You're going to tell a developer that sometimes their product doesn't meet what's expected in the community. Again, prioritizing use of tax increment financing within the community for redevelopment. We have 7 TIDs active, 6 TIDs active. We're up to TID number 8, which is the downtown area. 7 is the north side. They've been very effective in redevelopment. TID number 5 is the area around the Sandy Beach Road 89 corridor area. And you're seeing those things come to fruition. But this document says evaluate using TID more to encourage residential development. Obviously, within the law, there's limits on what you can do, on how much you can use it for in an area. But that will lessen the burden on a developer from an infrastructure perspective. That alleviates some of their risk. You will still own infrastructure. And using their development to pay for that infrastructure, it helps them make housing more cost effective to potential new residents. So here are some of the I'll say recent wins over the last few years. Redevelopment of the Lewis Street Station Winery in downtown. They've done a great job on that former gas station site. Topol's Towing, the redevelopment of that in TID number 5 really has gone a long way to being a springboard for new development down on the south end of the community. The Pharmacy Public House right here in downtown, which is in TID 8. You've used TID dollars on these projects to help them overcome some gaps, but they've really done a great job on those projects. And you can see, especially when you go down by Topol's, you can see that the redevelopment of that area is happening, and it's night and day from what it was a few years ago. Intergovernmental cooperation, again, focusing on boundary agreements. You had one that just expired, but kind of re-engage with the towns about that to define boundaries. Not always in your control. More intergovernmental meetings. I know that's what elected officials want to hear is more meetings, but really more communication, coordination with the school districts in your surrounding communities, because you do share a lot of resources. So being involved, we've heard from the civic organizations, we've heard from the other jurisdictions around you, being a more active player for them. They want to hear from you. They want to have someone there from the council who can help make decisions or help weigh in on issues that they're grappling with and how they align with what priorities the city has going on. So I know that's a lot, but it's a robust plan. Plan Commission worked very hard on it. If there's any other questions?
Any other initial questions for Dustin? Okay, we have another memo from Attorney Drescher talking about kind of the remaining process for the comprehensive plan, and I think it would be helpful for us to kind of walk through that first. This is a little different than amending an ordinance or something like that in terms of what the city council's authority is to take action on this comprehensive plan. So Attorney Drescher, if you could just kind of walk us through that information, and then we can get into a little more discussion.
Sure. A comprehensive plan is a requirement of state statute for cities. It has kind of a bifurcated process in that the plan commission creates the plan, recommends the plan, and the city council ultimately adopts a plan by ordinance. The city council doesn't have unilateral control in amending that plan. So if there are deficiencies that you see, the appropriate action would be to send it back to the plan commission for further action, further development, to explicitly address concerns that you may have. What I didn't discuss in the memo that I think is important kind of conceptually to understand is that the comprehensive plan itself is not a regulation. It's adopted by ordinance, but it's not, if you breach this, you will succumb to X, Y, or Z penalty. There are portions of it that are, the future land use map must be complied with. So I think that you need to be understanding that there is a distinct difference there. The action that you're expected to take is really a kind of a ratification of the process that the Plan Commission engaged in and an adoption of the final product. What that final product ultimately is and looks like, you do have some control, but you're not able to once again, unilaterally make substantive changes to the document. So in broad strokes, that's kind of where I'd like to start. I'm certainly happy to discuss any questions or comments that you may have.
So tonight we have a discussion, and we have a special meeting scheduled for next Monday at 5:30 to actually take action on the plan. So we can discuss tonight. We will also be able to discuss on Monday before taking an action.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but the big reason for this is holding the public hearing timely right now, which is required by statute as well as local ordinance. So this step, you're checking off boxes in the process, but you do have time to be deliberate here. I do go over in broad strokes in the brief memo that I provided, identifying specifically what is required by statute in the plan. It is categorized in specific items that must be addressed. This plan certainly does address that. The scope or breadth in which those issues are addressed is really kind of a meandering point. There's a lot of different versions of these documents out there. So how broad, how specific you go, I think that you have some levity there.
Okay, thank you. And I would refer people to the second page near the end of Attorney Drescher's memo that really kind of gives us the 4 actions that we can take.
Yeah.
1, to simply accept the plan. 2, maybe if we see some non-substantive changes, some edits or something like that. 3, rejection of the plan, or 4, sending it back to the Plan Commission with some specific direction for some revisions that we would like to see.
And I think there's, since we're continuing the conversation, I think there is a bit of a misnomer there. Rejection of the plan is required. We have a comprehensive zoning and planning aspect that we're required to engage in as a city in the state of Wisconsin. So outright rejection of the plan doesn't really mean rejection of the plan. Ultimately, this document, although not regulatory in nature, is required to pursue grants, is required to specifically address those kind of regulatory concerns, the future land use map, having an idea of what future development looks like. But then once again, you're kind of towing the line there. What does the scope of that inquiry look like is kind of where you and the Plan Commission are involved in creating and bringing this plan forward. It is required by the state, though. So.
Mr. Waters.
So the way I read that is a rejection of the plan doesn't mean City Council won't accept a comprehensive plan. It's just sending that back to the Plan Commission to basically take another shot at it without our feedback, where option 4, as Ms. Curlew just defined, would allow city council to maybe provide some feedback that they could review and maybe incorporate into the plan before they bring it back to city council.
Before their recommendation, correct?
Before the recommendation back to city council, which we would have the option to go through items 1, 2, 3, 4 again and decide if we want to accept it or not, so.
So,
But-
okay.
I guess what I got out of it as well is that with a lot of things that come from boards and commissions, that it's ultimately city council's final decision. We can line item and do whatever we want almost with those type of things. But here, that's not the case.
It's very clear in state statute that that is not the case. And frankly, before this process, I had a different understanding until I engaged and discussed. And the league has been a very useful tool in this. A number of attorneys have discussed this process with me as well. Because it's relatively new in statute. It's been around for about 20 years. But entities are entering kind of the second or third iteration of these plans at this point, so the process is being refined. But you are absolutely correct. Based on state statute, you have limited authority to just engage in substantive changes on the plan that has been recommended by the Plan Commission.
Thank you.
Any other questions on kind of the process, Mr. Fields?
I guess for some clarification, I'll use this one example, maybe to build on what Mr. Waters is talking about. Like on 713, it says the city will establish a room tax, but yet in 2 other sections here, it says we will consider a room tax. So I'm looking at some discrepancies that way, looking more for consistency more than anything. I would like to have this committee recommending to us to do a room tax. I'm fine with the recommendation, but when they put in here that we absolutely will enact a room tax, that I struggle with, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that kind of goes to that point about what is this document? It is
Right.
not gospel, okay? It's not
Yep.
written in stone. The document itself is amendable. The specific regulatory aspects of the document would require subsequent ordinance to amend. This document itself requires an ordinance to adopt. You know, there's a little bit of a distinction there. So with regard to your consideration there, Scrivener's errors or consistency throughout the plan, so long as it's not viewed as substantive, you can probably go through and say, I'm not comfortable with this language. I think this is what they meant because they explicitly stated it in such a manner in this section. That's probably appropriate, but you're starting to toe a line there as in regards to like substantive changes. They say this, we don't agree with that, put a red X through it and move on. That wouldn't be allowed.
That helps a little bit just to clarify, because that's kind of what I was reading through this and looking for the consistency and kind of the plan, what we're going to follow.
And then on that, it's been a very deliberate process, and I think of certain municipal processes, this is one that really should be deliberate. You should go through it and reach a final product that has been well vetted and that everyone is comfortable with. So you will save time by engaging in that deliberate process now, as opposed to passing something just for the sake of passing it and coming back and having to do, multiple amendments in the future.
And I know other people have comments. I'd like to just quickly follow up on Mr. Fields' comment there. In your response, Dan, that it's not a law, it's not an ordinance, it's a plan, but yet I do see some things in here that I think people may rely on and want to hold us to, and that would be an example of that. And to Mr. Waters' earlier point, I think there are some general statements about, for example, revising and updating the bicycle plan, and yet there's a couple of specific references to specific streets. So those don't really go together, and so how do we are those, Scrivener's errors, are those things maybe we want to send back to the Plan Commission and ask them to clarify which one do you mean here? Or, maybe there's more than one way to address that.
Or in this specific case, could we just send it back asking for a revision that the city will evaluate a room tax?
Evaluate or consider? Evaluate or consider, because they use consider in 2 other areas in the document.
Sweet.
And there's one statement that says you will do it.
Yeah, Mrs. Bishop.
No, I think this is a really good point discussion, Mr. Fields, that you brought up, and Mr. Waters, that you're making comments on. I'm trying to speak to the general intent of the Plan Council discussions that we had. So again, I hope I'm doing that fairly. And in every instance where we came up with what Mr. Fields is describing as a must or a shall or have to do, we did, I believe, try to say, pull that back and say, we're making a recommendation that we consider this, that this is something that's been of interest to our people. And so I think that just may be an oversight in that one particular call out that Mr. Fields made. And I think it would be right for this council, if we have concerns about that, to tell the Plan Commission to go back. We did not line item, line by line of many hundreds of pages, but to say, like, is this your intent in this instance? And if it's not, could you go through and make sure that your intent is to, if it's you shall, do that, if any of those words are there. If it's not, remove, would you consider maybe some more ameliorative language there?
Any other discussion items? I had one you talked specifically, Mr. Drescher, about the future land use map, and that specifically is law, so to speak. That is more binding, and you have to go through a process if you want to change that. So we did get a public comment regarding a particular piece of property on the south side of town that from Mr. Johnson.
And it's an interesting comment, and I think it's an appropriate comment. He's looking at that from the proposed uses that surround that specific site. And he identifies what, in his opinion, is maybe a use that doesn't necessarily match what was either intended or what's surrounding the area. And I think that is potentially a valid point. The other side of it is, I don't know how much he delved into the usability of that land. I think that there are multiple angles to look at such comments from, and that point definitely has veracity, and I think he raises some statements that in general you would say, yes, that makes sense, but then you delve into it, and there may be a reason that it was identified as such by the professionals that have worked on making that map. I don't know that there's a right answer. I know that future land use map can be changed in the future. It would just take a specific process, and that would be an ordinance amending the future land use map outside of this document once it's adopted.
So, and I was sort of operating on the assumption, and Attorney Drescher or Dustin, you can tell me if this is correct or not, but if there was a change in the land use from the existing map to the future map, I made an assumption that the Plan Commission made a choice on that and chose to make that change. So that the property that Mr. Johnson raised in his comment is an example of that went from farmland to industrial. Another one that I noted was the current location of the Summer Ridge Apartments, which went from farmland, although I think that, from the prior plan, I think at some point it had been rezoned to multifamily, and now it certainly has been developed as multifamily, but it's shown as business. So, maybe that was an error, just an error in the coloring on the map, but I think, to the extent that we've got something that's already developed, I would like the land use map to reflect that accurately.
It absolutely should be consistent throughout, yes.
Dustin,
I think that's this request is a great one, that if you were going to ask the Plan Commission to just, let's give it another look. The history of that property has been, Unshaven Lane is eventually intended to connect through to CP Avenue Extended. Historically, there was a development proposal a number of years ago for a manufacturing plant in that location. I think that's where it was changed to future industrial development. The connection of CP to Unshaven will obviously be another route for connection into the industrial park. Is this land that should start from 89, start transitioning or be available to light or planned industrial? So I absolutely think it's something, a request has been made, and if the council feels, the pencil might need to be sharpened there, that's where you should ask the Plan Commission to, let's take another look at that.
thank you. I guess one other this is more of a general comment, but I think Mr. Fields' example is perhaps an example of this as well, where there's, or a community center is another example, where there's lots of statements throughout, the 193 pages about, recommendations or things that the city should consider. But then there's some very specific sections that talk about objectives and goals. And so one thing that I noted is there is, and as you highlighted in response to Ms. Quidnow's question, yes, there's a paragraph that talks about the community talked about wanting to have a community center and a senior center. But there's not a goal in this document for the city to consider developing a senior center, for example. So I feel like if that is really if the Plan Commission thinks that is something that the city should be working on in the next 10 years, I'd like to see that stated more as a goal. Same thing like with the room tax. If they think that's something that we should be looking at, then I'd like to see that as a goal rather than just, one of the many bullet points throughout the document. So that was just kind of an overarching concern that I had as I was reading through, thinking, okay, well, what will this city do when this is done? I think we would want to work on the goals and prioritize working on those goals. And so wanting to make sure that the goals are really what the Plan Commission thinks are the top things to work on.
In melding other documents, existing documents and strategies and directives into this document, you certainly want to be consistent. I mean, this council has gone through 2 years of strategic planning at this point where you have done goal-setting sessions. That should really be incorporated into such a document. I mean, it should at least be referenced and understood. I'm not saying that it's not, but you can go broad or you can go specific in some circumstances. And I think tailoring that may be appropriate. It's really between the two boards, the Plan Commission and the City Council, there's some form of melding or some marriage that will occur there.
Mr. Wise, did you want to say something more on
that? It was a comment that I noticed as I looked at the last section. They were talking about the smart growth. And when I was reviewing this whole document, I was looking at it from our strategic plan that we did in 2022 that was not included in this document. And I was looking at smart growth throughout the whole process. And I thought, boy, that should have been listed in chapter 1, and it should have been considered throughout, instead of saying, hey, when you implement this, you should be looking at smart growth. Well, why wasn't that considered throughout the document? Maybe you would say it was, but I kept thinking as I went through the document, and especially when it was related to economic development, I was thinking the whole time, smart growth, smart growth, smart growth, and it didn't seem like it was there. So
I certainly see your perspective. I would say the elements of smart growth are absolutely in the plan. Prioritizing infill development is a strong component and redevelopment, a strong component of smart growth. Minimizing extension utilities where unnecessary, evaluating how infrastructure is going to be maintained and expanded in the future, providing a variety of housing types, products, and higher densities in certain aspects. But your point is taken that it's not like a brick through a plate glass window saying smart growth, right? So yes, I'm certain that's something that could be evaluated.
I wanted to follow up on your note about the strategic plan, and it was the very first time I read an earlier draft of this, it caught my attention that there's a mission statement and a vision for the city in this document that doesn't match ours in the strategic plan, in the strategic plan that we developed last year. And I don't think there was, our processes were parallel, so they weren't, melded, to use your term, Attorney Drescher. So I'm not saying I disagree with the language in this plan, but it's just interesting how they don't necessarily align with one another. And I would picture that updated comprehensive plan would be heavily relied on by this council as we would be updating our strategic plan over time. But they do need to kind of work together, and I'm just not sure how to align that.
Yeah, to be fair, I think when Chapter 1 was being reviewed, it was about the same time we were writing the strategic plan.
Right,
So,
right.
so maybe that's where it didn't come together for some reason.
Yeah, I can certainly speak, as Mr. Drescher kind of pointed out, the vision statement that's in this plan is a carryover from the previous plan. The Plan Commission evaluated it and felt it still held true. I think there was some minor tweakings to it. I'm looking at Brian on that, some minor tweakings, but really they felt it was still the vision that was held by the community as it relates to the comprehensive plan. But point taken, yeah, when you have two parallel planning processes going on, comprehensive looking 20 years out, strategic really looking 5 to 10, right? There certainly should be consistency between them, combination of prioritization of them, so.
Ms. Quetta?
I'm in agreement with what they have just said, and I think a large part of it would help with finding it to be easy for us to plan how we implement the comprehensive plan. Because if we don't see those alignments, it's going to be, piecemealing it together, and it makes sense to put together those two visions, because they're going to be there. There's some definite similarities, but there's some differences that really, I think, impact how exactly a lot of the vision that the planning committee put together, how that's going to get done. So I'm of the opinion that I like the idea of incorporating our comprehensive plan our strategic plan within the comprehensive plan, just so that we can, so that people can see what the strategic plan is based on the information that this council has put together and what our vision is, as well as the comprehensive plan that's been created.
I just see, let me backtrack. What we're seeing here is a direct tension between a body that is appointed and now has a statutory mission from a higher government level and has created a plan in accordance with that, vice this body, the corpus of which is chosen by the electorate on a yearly basis, or whatever our term is, right? And can change much more quickly than a plan commission can. So to the extent that this body, the council, wants to incorporate elements of the strategic plan that we discussed and passed, if we have portions of that we want done specifically in the comprehensive plan, we should call those out specifically, because the plan commission doesn't have our same charter and mission or reason for existing. So yes, our strategic plan should be embodied in parts in the comp plan, but to the extent that the comp plan is a very different statutory mission, I don't think that the plan commission they don't have to adopt our strategic plan whole cloth. So I just want to make that clear that they're not required to do that. Considering it, absolutely. But do I expect them to incorporate our entire strategic plan word for word, point for point, intent for intent? No, I do not.
Thank you very much for expressing it that way, Mrs. Bishop, because I think it is exactly that. It's this tension for a statutory-driven process that's different than all the other things that we do, where our body is the top decision maker, and so there is this tension, and we're trying to understand, like, how do these work together? So I appreciate you saying that, and I think it's good for us to think about, well, what should we be expecting if we were to choose to send this back to the Plan Commission for any revisions? What should be the kind of the bounds of that, or what should be the kind of within the scope of that? One other thing that has crossed my mind as I've read it, and it probably fits into that same area, is, there are some initiatives that this council has taken on very recently that are not reflected in this. And again, they're sort of parallel processes, but should we be identifying something like
the Mill Pond study or the Rock Lake water levels? Should we be identifying any of those or asking the Plan Commission to identify those in the comp plan? Or are those just things that the council deals with as a matter of course and they don't necessarily have to be reflected in a comprehensive plan because you couldn't anticipate them? So I don't know, Dustin, if you've run across that with other communities or how you address that.
I think from your strategic plan, there's a fair amount of overlap. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. I think from your strategic plan, there's a fair amount of overlap, and I think that there's an opportunity to call out where there's alignment within them. You talk about providing consistent and dependable emergency services. We absolutely have sections in there to talk about that. Maybe we need to call out that this aligns with a priority or strategic objective of this plan. Like, I think there's elements in there. You talk about processes in there, and we talk in the comprehensive plan about evaluating the city's development process and making sure that it works for businesses big and small, that it works for development, right? I think there's things in there that align. Maybe we just haven't done a great job to highlight them, right? And I think if there are specific things that you feel are contrary to that the comp plan is contrary to the strategic plan, then yes, you should be asking the Plan Commission to look at them. And maybe they just get pointed out as there might be a little deviation between the two entities on that.
And you know what, emergency services is probably a very good example of that. This council and staff have spent a significant amount of time working on emergency services as one of our strategic priorities in the last year, and doesn't have a significant amount of text in the comprehensive plan. That doesn't mean the plan doesn't mention it, and it doesn't mean it's not an important role of the city. So, you know, it's just kind of like, well, how do we?
Is that a place that a Plan Commission should be getting into the weeds? I would argue not necessarily.
Good point.
Right? Their goal is to make sure that, yes, we understand that we have the services, that we continue to provide the service, the value of the services. But as a Plan Commission, I mean, they're looking at, do we have continuous routes through the community? Because we saw that on the 89 construction. It's a challenge, right? So those are concerns I think the Plan Commission has. They're not going to get into staffing issues. They're not going to be making recommendations on whether or not that services should be wholly controlled and operated by the city versus contract services, right? So I think there is a difference of mission, as Ms. Bishop was saying, than the council has, right? And so if they put something in there, you're like, we can't afford that, right? I think that's a challenge, but I think you can point out if there's something I think that is in the Plan Commission purview that I don't say let's just say a difference. Maybe we do need to just kind of call that out. But
Yeah, Ms. Quidna.
So I'm a visual learner, and the analogy idea makes sense for me. Are we looking at the comprehensive plan as though it's a very large umbrella, and that the strategic plan that our council or any council puts together at some point falls underneath that umbrella? Because the Plan Commission, or I'm sorry, the comprehensive plan is our overarching mindset of what we're going to be doing, and how exactly that's implemented would need to be worked out by us through what we have created as our strategic plan.
I think you're absolutely right. The comprehensive plan is a larger umbrella, right, that things fall under. You have a section on Sandy Beach. We talk about Sandy Beach, and we also direct you to most of the detail related to Sandy Beach is in the CORP, the Comprehensive Outdoor Rec Plan, right? You talk about it in 2 bullets. We talk about it in a whole lot more than that, right? So which one is more? I think we just need to point out that this is also a priority of the strategic plan, right? I think that's important.
Okay.
Communications, you talk about tools for improving communications. You talk about engaging citizens in a variety of ways. I feel like we hammer that home throughout the comprehensive plan, the importance of it, because we heard it so much. Infrastructure and capital improvements, we talk about continuing with your capital improvement program, which you've done famously over the years, right? So I think there's things in there. I think maybe we just need to call out, little blue ribbon by some of these items in the comprehensive plan where there's this alignment. I don't think it's that dissimilar. I just don't think maybe it's presented in the same way that your strategic plan is, right? So I think I don't think we're dissimilar in that way. The Plan Commission recommended comprehensive plan in your strategic plan, but I know we reference as a plan that we reviewed early on. I'm looking at Brian on that when we do kind of the background components of this. But I would say I don't think we had call out boxes or highlighting like there was specific alignment of these priorities, right? And maybe that's what we need to do. Maybe that's something you need to request that the Plan Commission consider to do.
And maybe just as a follow-up on that, I mean, I think, as you've said before, I mean, this plan is a higher level plan. It lays out a number of recommendations and goals, but then it's really up to the city council to prioritize which ones do we think are important to work on now, in the next 2 years, in the next 5 years. So that's where we still have our authority, is to say, well, this is, there's lots of things to do in this 10-year plan, or 20-year plan, but we're not going to do them all this year. These are the ones we're going to, focus on this year, and that's the role of the council to set those. Mr. Myers.
With the scope of our agenda tonight, we are going to talk about this on Monday, I believe. We're in a special meeting, because I know I've been triggered a couple times, but I've held back. Should we move on with the agenda if everyone's okay?
Well, I would like to make sure, and part of the reason that we do have this separated tonight and for next Monday, is to make sure that we all understand sort of the scope of our authority, so that then we can come prepared based on our own reading and reflection and the public comments, to come prepared with what we want to move forward as a decision on Monday. So do people feel like you've got a good grasp of sort of our authority and the scope of what we can do on Monday?
Dan, you'll be there on Monday?
Yeah, certainly.
Oh, yeah, I'm good.
Then you're good.
I-
Anybody else?
I don't want to overstep here, but I believe Catherine had a comment, and
Oh,
I
I'm
think
sorry.
I know what it is, and I want to hear it.
Oh, well, now I don't know what I was going to say.
I can
no,
tell you.
Sorry if I missed your hand.
No, Ms. Curler, you started to say where I thought I was going to go, and I'll just use the example of the mill pond purely by way of example. And it's that the way the Plan Commission addressed this was never to pick out like a specific project and say, in the comp plan, by way of the comp plan, city council, you will dredge the mill pond, you will study the invasive species, and you will, make a decision by this date or do something, right? And so to the extent that that would be included, or a recommendation by this council to have the Plan Commission include that, I think would be inappropriate, because the council retains the absolute authority to, as you were starting to say, and that's why I didn't really have anything to say after that, was, yes, we will spend the money on this. We have the power of the purse this year to do the dredging project, again, by way of example. Or, that wasn't a priority in our strategic plans, we won't take it up in the next 5 years. But the goal of the comp plan, as I saw it, was to take in feedback, review what was, and to, with those two things, identify what the community may want in the future, and set up ways for the council to address that, particularly with the land use and the zoning ordinances that will come into play that we're statutorily required to do based on the comp plan. So that's kind of what I wanted to say. That's, again, our focus, and I think how I approached our conversations on the Plan Commission.
Thank you very much. And that's so helpful, because you've served for really the full 2 years, or, you served for 2 years, and during the full length of time that the Plan Commission was working on this. And so we're really appreciative and dependent on some of your recollections of the meeting and what the Plan Commission, what their intention was as we have this discussion. Okay, so any further questions on process or how to be looking at this for Monday? Great. Mr. Waters.
She triggered me, but I'm not going to go there. But I am going to go to that, that I don't think it's an attack on the Planning Commission or the consultants. We just want to put the best product out there. And I hope nobody's seeing it as an attack, but it's a city document that outlines our future objectives and plans. And I think it needs to be I don't think it should get a rubber stamp. I think it needs to be reviewed, and it needs to have some of our desires and passions in the document as well, so.
Thank you for that. And I do want to acknowledge again the great work of the Plan Commission over a long period of time, the support of our planning consultant, and everyone here this evening. I can tell everybody's been digging into the document and really trying to understand it and ask questions. So I appreciate all of that. And so we will continue this discussion and make a decision on the comprehensive plan at next Monday night special meeting, which is at 5:30 here in this room, I believe. Okay, so we are done with item 9B. We've done C already, so we're moving on to item D on the agenda, which is the discussion decision regarding the Class A fermented malt beverage and Class A liquor for Handyspot 104 LLC. And I would note that there's two related ones here. So I guess on letter D, can I get a motion for this license?
I move to approve the Class A fermented malt beverage and Class A liquor for Handyspot 104 LLC, doing business as BP, located at 819 North Main Street, and appointing Cindy Mitchell as agent.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Bishop, second by Mr. Fields. Misty, do you have any background information you want to give us on this?
The business sold, this license is exactly the same. In fact, it's the same agent. The licenses are available. It's just a new owner.
Okay. Any questions or comments on this application? Okay. Oh, Mr. Waters, did you have a question?
Nope, I was
Okay.
just waving by.
Okay. All right. Hearing none, Ms. T, can we have a roll call on the Class A fermented malt beverage and Class A liquor license for Handyspot 104 LLC?
Ms. Curler,
Aye.
Mr. Waters,
Aye.
Mrs. Bishop,
Aye.
Ms. Quidnow,
Aye.
Mr. Fields.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, on to letter E, which is similar. This is regarding a Class A fermented malt beverage and Class A liquor for Handyspot 101 LLC, which is located at 203 West Main Street, and appointing Sheryle Stovell as agent. Can we have a motion on that?
So moved.
Second. Okay, motion by Mrs. Bishop, second by Ms. Quidnow. And Misty, I believe you said this is all similar situation. It's a change in ownership, but the same agent. Is that correct?
This one is similar. The only difference with this one is the previous owner had a Class A liquor cider only, and the new owner applied for the Class A liquor. There is one available. Same agent, everything else is the same. This would be for a full Class A liquor, though.
Okay. Any questions? Okay, can we have a roll call?
Mr. Waters,
Aye.
Mrs. Bishop,
Aye.
Ms. Quidnow,
Aye.
Mr. Fields,
Aye.
Ms. Curler.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. Okay, on to letter F. This is a discussion and decision regarding the issuance of a Sandy Beach food service request for proposals. And I note that we have a prepared motion. Misty, could you read that title, please?
City Council Motion 23-7-1-1, authorizing the city manager to advertise a Sandy Beach restaurant, bar, concession facilities development, and operations request for proposals.
Is there a motion?
I move to approve motion 23-7-1-1, authorizing the city manager to advertise a Sandy Beach restaurant, bar, concession facilities development and operation request for proposals.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Quidnow, second by Mr. Waters. Okay, so we have Attorney Drescher and Eric Schreiner here for any questions that we may have. Attorney Drescher, do you want to walk through anything? This is a follow-up from our work session that we had.
Yeah, we had done an RFP, 2 years ago about, And then a subsequent RFP was brought to you in June of this year. Subsequently, there was a work session that was held where kind of your specifications, your desires, reaction to the previous RFP and proposals that were received were kind of incorporated, and the document was redrafted with much of those comments and considerations pulled in. At this point, you have a document in front of you that is viewed as appropriate for an RFP process. The timeline for the process has been fairly well established. I think this has come together, but it is still, the ball is in your court on this. If you want subsequent changes to the actual RFP, if there are priorities that you feel have not been captured, this would be the time to provide direction on what that document needs to look like prior to releasing it and seeking bids for development at that site.
Okay, so we have a proposed RFP that has incorporated some changes based on the direction we gave at our work session. Does anyone have any comments or questions or suggested changes on this proposed RFP? Can certainly see on the second page, there's sort of a summary of some of the key findings in the survey. And I think we had talked about that a copy of the survey results would also go out with the RFP so that an applicant could look at those. I have just a couple of comments. One, just a Scrivener's thing, bottom of page 4.
It does look like not every adjustment and change has been incorporated. There's a number of track changes that were not accepted in this document. I don't know if this RFP is actually what was deemed final, but there was some formatting issue, and I think it's by and large the correct document. I'm not seeing anything that is like left out or anything that was specifically supposed to be included that has not been, but there are Scrivener's errors and editing that still needs to be done on this document.
Well, based on our past experience, I think we can approve something even if there's some of those kinds of Scrivener's errors that need to be corrected. So this is at the bottom of page 4. There's an extra "and" or some word missings in the line asking for the applicant's information. I think it's 2A, Roman numeral 3. One, I guess, comment I had just for clarity, at the bottom of page 8, and it's letter O and then letter A, and under the days and hours. The second sentence says, what date would you open or close? And I thought that the sentence was maybe not super clear, that maybe it could be prefaced by saying, if not open year-round, then what dates are you be proposing to be open? So maybe just kind of a clarifying phrase there. And then on page 9, there's a couple of references to like the food and beverages. I just think some, on page 9 under OB, something along the lines of what food, beverages, other products, or other services do you expect to offer? We're not going to hold somebody to exactly a precise menu or precise pricing. I think we had that the last go around as well, but just kind of asking them to, what do they expect to do? What are, some examples of the proposed menu items or the proposed prices that they would have, just to give a little more latitude to the applicant.
Ms. Carler?
Yes, Ms. Cardinal.
I'm scanning the document, and if I miss it, please let me know. But we had talked about the person, whomever is writing the proposal, would be able to have in here some possible responsibility or participation in what exactly the restaurant would look like or how it would be put together, or, and I see that we have in here the information about lease agreements, but I don't see anything about I see an operation plan and the management and operational structure, but I'm not seeing necessarily that they're going to participate or that they have any kind of an idea of what they would like it to look like. Is that the conceptual design plan on page 4?
I think under building site construction and leasing structure, those ideas are incorporated or intended to be incorporated.
Yeah, and I just caught them as I was talking, so that's great.
Well, I note something on the top of page 3 in the bold. It talks about approximately 8,000 square feet of buildable area. Building design is subject to approval by the council, so I guess it doesn't directly say it, but it does kind of indicate that they can propose something they can propose a design to us, and then, we would review it, or the city would review it.
Attorney Drescher is correct. It's under subsection B pretty clearly. I just didn't see it, and I apologize.
Does anyone else have questions or comments or suggested edits on the draft RFP? Okay, if not, can we have a roll call, please?
Mrs. Bishop,
Aye.
Ms. Quidnow,
Aye.
Mr. Fields,
Aye.
Ms. Curler,
Aye.
Mr. Waters.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. Okay, letter G is a discussion / decision on amending the Municipal Building Community Center policy. And we've talked about this at a previous meeting, and Mrs. Bishop has worked up a new draft for us and a memo describing some of the changes. So would you like to just walk through the latest changes?
Okay, so I do have a memo. I know it was only submitted today, so I apologize for that. There are 3 main changes that I've identified, apart from just, some language changes that were not substantive. And I made these changes based on what I thought had the most concurrence, so as to make the least amount of changes tonight. So section 1, you'll see that I just updated the policy statement to include language that would allow the city of Lake Mills to take priority over other users, emulating in some ways the Lake Mills Area School District policy language where they can boot other users if they have a school use. So I didn't use the exact language from the school district, but I took that and some of the comments from the last meeting, took some creative liberties there. Section 4 there, specific feedback we got was to differentiate 2 types of government users, so I did incorporate that. And the main differentiating factor there was whose budget does the organization fall under, and then creating those 2 categories of government users for the building facilities. And then section 6, just a small change there because we spoke specifically about CATV operation. Should that equipment be available, I just split up the sections again for ease of discussion tonight, and if we end up taking it out, it's just easy to renumber those sections and not bifurcate another paragraph. So, and then I left it open for 3 other areas that I identified in our last discussion that maybe still need to be hashed out tonight, or would be open for people to make specific suggestions. So I hope, again, I covered the discussion there and made the appropriate changes. And again, it's open to our final discussion tonight or whatever this council decides to do with this document. So thank you, Ms. Curler.
And thank you, Mrs. Bishop, for your continued work on this. It's really been a labor of love, so I appreciate it. Does anyone have any questions or comments on the latest version of this policy update? Mr. Waters.
I would just like to thank Mrs. Bishop for reviewing those recommendations and implementing them into this this policy. So thank you for taking that time. I do have one other point I guess I'd like to make is that I think it's a great document, but when I look at the fee schedule for the city residents, I think definitely that they should get a nicer price. I mean, they pay taxes and they should get an advantage. But I think the non-residents should be more like a triple effect from the city residents. So I guess I'm going to put together some type of amendment here real quick that would jack up those non-resident prices by about 50%. So like the weekday fee schedule for council chambers for city residents would be $50, and for non-residents, I would suggest $150. So my motion to amend, let me get my ducks in a row. Thank you.
Mr. Waters, could I just have you repeat that one more time for me? I just want to make sure I wrote it down properly.
I'll get it here in a second, Misty. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
He's still trying to find it.
Okay.
Here we go. So I actually had it saved on a different tab. Thank you.
So while Mr. Waters
So
is
go ahead.
looking for that, the way it's currently set up is that the non-resident fee is double the city resident fee, and you're saying that you would perhaps triple it. Was that
Triple
what
it,
you were?
yeah.
Okay. But I'll
So
let you-
the appendix isn't labeled, but my motion is to modify the appendix so that the non-resident fees for both the weekday and weeknight, weekend, and holiday fees would all triple that of the city residents. So the first example would be the $50 for council chambers, and that would go up to $150 by tripling that fee. Does that make sense? So that's my motion.
I'll second that. So for discussion then on that proposed amendment, Mr. Waters, you're kind of saying across the both tables.
Right.
The whole right side column, all of those would be tripled rather than doubled from the resident fee.
Correct.
Okay. Any comments or questions or discussion on that?
I think that would bring it into more of a fair market value price. When I looked at the doubling, I still felt that that was probably below market price. I thought tripling would bring it into the appropriate level, so.
I support the idea, particularly because, as you said, it gives sort of more deference to city residents who are the folks who have paid for this building and, you know, are paying for its upkeep. Okay, can we have a vote on the proposed amendment to the fee schedule? So it would be having a triple fee for non-residents, triple room fee compared to the city residents. Can we have a roll call?
Ms. Quidnow?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Mr. Waters?
Aye.
Mrs. Bishop?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. So one of the items you mentioned in your memo, Mrs. Bishop, that you did not address has to do with the, oh, I'm sorry.
I'm going to call timeout.
Yeah.
I don't know if I could have made that amendment because we haven't had a motion to consider yet tonight, have we?
Well, making that motion isn't appropriate, or isn't inappropriate, because it was motioned and it was second and it was clear in the action that was taken. So now I just think that the only document you're looking at is the amended document rather than the document in its original form.
Okay.
When the
thank you.
motion comes isn't necessarily always like exclusive or what the motion that you made was appropriate. So it was
Okay.
heard, it was seconded, it was voted on.
All right, just want to make sure we weren't breaching anything.
Thank you. I'm glad you checked on that. So at some point, we will need an ultimate motion on
Now that it
the
has
final
been amended,
document
correct.
if we decide to move ahead with voting on it tonight. So, okay. I'd like to address an issue that you had highlighted in your memo that you did not make any changes on. And this has to do with, at least my proposal from our last discussion was that
different sanctioned users would be subject to different fees. And what I mean by that is, so as I'm reading this now, the American Red Cross, for their monthly blood drive, would need to either pay, I guess, non-resident fees to use the community room, or they could apply to be a sanctioned user to use the room once a month for no rental fee, but they would have to pay $200. And I think right now they're not paying anything. And so I'm just trying to think about how we have a number of 501c3 nonprofit organizations that use our facilities, and I feel like $200 is a lot to ask, as opposed to an organization that's not a charitable organization, $200 to use a room once a month for 12 months. That's not that much to ask. So I guess I would like us to consider having a different fee for 501c3 nonprofit of perhaps $50. So it's not zero. There is still some kind of recognition that, yeah, they're using the facilities, they're using electricity, scratching the floor, et cetera, but that it not be as burdensome for a nonprofit. So I'm wondering what other people think about that.
So they would currently be a sanctioned user? Is that the way
They
you see that?
Could apply to be a sanctioned user, yes.
They could apply to be a sanctioned user, or they could just pay the fee each
Right.
time they want to use the room.
Yes.
Yeah. And was I correct in that they would be an organization that's, I think what we call them now, Class B users, so they would be on our Class B list right now?
Right. The old Class B, yeah, now it would just be the sanctioned user category, so a sanctioned user list.
Okay, so under our current policy, they're on the Class B list and they pay
Right.
no fee.
Correct, yes.
So are you thinking of amending that a nonprofit would have its own class, or
No, I think they could follow the exact same sanctioned user process as anyone else who's applying to be a sanctioned user. And if they, document that they're a 501c3 organization, they would have, I guess I would propose a $50 fee, annual fee to be a sanctioned user, as opposed to another entity that would have a $200 fee.
And then would we waive the room fee at that point?
Go ahead.
Ms. Curler was explaining it correctly earlier, but once you are a sanctioned user, that entitles you to use of the facilities one time per month for free. If you exceed the one time per month, so let's say you had 2 events in a month, but you're a sanctioned user, the second use would then be for the fee charged at, whether you're a resident or non-resident, that applicable rate.
Thank you.
Just for clarity, applying to be a sanctioned user is just directly to the city manager. It does not require action by city council.
That was one of the processes that changed in this new revised community center policy. So the way it works generally under the new policy we have before us would be similar to how we do like our liquor licenses under consent agenda. There's an application period at the beginning of the year. Those applications are processed as long as the fee and your application form comes in, and then the council would consider that and approve those sanctioned users at a meeting, I want to say I said in July, but it's supposed to mirror that consent agenda process. And so it would come to council for approval, to answer your question. And I don't know if you were here, Ms. Quinnell, at the last meeting. I think I said it then. The idea behind that and bringing it to council approval, it is a 2-year process, so it does, we're not looking at this very frequently, but it was to sort of bring to light, bring out in the open who is a sanctioned user and what considerations we're talking about, because when this was first discussed 2 years ago, right, when a local group had their application denied, nobody knew what the sanctioned user list was. You know, it was kind of this like hidden document. And so I wanted to bring that out in the light and have a public process for making those decisions. And that's why with city staff, we kind of made those decisions. But again, it's, you know, if we don't want to do that, that was one of those things we talked about at the last meeting. Like maybe this should just be a city manager approval. That's up in the air, you know, if we make that change to this document tonight or in the future.
Yeah, I recall that very vividly. It was like, what is this list that we have never seen? And some of the people on the list never have used it since being put on the list. So having it regularly.
They don't exist anymore as organizations.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So having it regularly surveyed to determine if it's still they're still viable seems like a really good idea. The only thing that concerns me is that if a 503B organization,
501c3.
501c3, whatever, if they wanted to apply, does that hold them back by waiting for us to meet and discuss and so on and so forth? Versus, you know, at that 2-year mark, maybe having that conversation and saying, does this organization still need or require to be on the list? So that it's not necessarily that we aren't looking at it, but that it's not held back or delayed in the process. And that way then they're not delayed in the process of getting together whatever event they have in mind.
Yeah, if I can address that, Mrs. Curler. Sure. And Missy, I may rely on you to help me, but I think our thought process was like we would do this in a batch application process, again, similar to the consent agenda process. But if there was an application in the meantime, or like how we just considered the liquor license, that could still come to us in the meantime, you know, as applications come in. So, I mean, we have to balance, do we want that or not? But I think I don't think it would prohibit somebody from coming in mid-year and trying to be a sanctioned user.
Sure, I'm not saying that it would. I'm just thinking about like if, but then again, I'm assuming everybody works last minute. So just the idea that they wanted to, like the following month, for example, wanted to hold a blood drive or whatever event there is, but they're held back because they have to wait for us to approve it. Right. I feel confident in Mr. Daly's ability to determine if this is a good idea. And then when we do that batch, maybe then that would be our time to, you know, just to analyze the list and see if everything is hunky-dory or if we need to cut it back a little bit.
So we were originally talking about a different fee for different sanctioned users, and we've shifted, which is fine, we've shifted a little bit into talking about what the process will be for approving it. My view is I would like to keep this simple and have this be an administrative function that is implemented by staff. So I think if we want to see that sanctioned user list, we can ask for it at any time. We can ask for it to be produced once a year or once every couple of years. So if the council is interested in knowing who's on it or how the new process is working, I think we can get that. I agree that the consent agenda process is fairly swift. There's nothing in this document that says that it would be done by consent agenda, and I feel it's more burdensome and taking more time to have to bring something to the council. If we have a very clear process in place, you pay your $200, you fill out the form, you're on the list. You know, I would like for people to just come in with their check and fill out the form and be able to be on the list and start to schedule their meetings instead of having to wait for us to vote on it. So I guess those are, you know, together, those are two thoughts that I would have for updating this. One is to just have the approval of sanctioned users be done administratively by our city manager or whoever he delegates, and then have a slightly lower fee for nonprofits.
Where do you see the $200 fee?
It's on that same fee schedule that we were looking at with Mr. Waters and
The last one?
I don't remember what page
Yeah,
it's on.
Because-
fee schedule is the last page, yeah. That way, as it gets updated year to year, you can rip it out and just add it to the back of the packet.
That's really good, yeah. Just update the last page.
The reason I ask is because under whoop, I missed it. Under the, I just had it. Oh, okay, sanctioned users. You had mentioned it was up to one time per month at no cost. In this in this paragraph, there's no mention of a fee, and I feel like though there is a fee schedule at the end or at the appendix, it might be beneficial to put that $200 in there just so that there's no surprises.
So Michelle, go down to the third paragraph up from the bottom of page 5. The sanctioned user application fee set forth in appendix blank fee schedule must be submitted with the application.
So it does.
So we just have, the highlighted areas is what you're saying you wanted to, we have to name that appendix.
Well, yeah, once everything's like set and the appendices are like, that's what we want, then we can just go ahead and add the alphabet.
Okay.
Yeah, add the letter.
Yeah,
Add
the letter thing. I don't know why I said that way.
Okay.
But I did use the title fee schedule there to make it clear that we're talking about the fee schedule appendix.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, yeah, I mean, that's just something that I think we can go in and add the letter at the end, once everything is like set.
And let me make sure I'm understanding this too, as we're talking about how the fees are applied, because there's a couple places where it mentioned a sanctioned user is a no fee, but yet there is the fee to be on the list. So, and as I am looking at the fee schedule, there could be some other fees that a sanctioned user might have to pay, right? Like the open and close fee or the equipment fees, is that right? So it's really just the room rental that is free, is that right?
Right, and
Okay.
the thought process would be to take into account, again, like use, just maintenance of the equipment, time for staff, that is in addition to regular, just coming in during business hours.
So that would be part of their application process if they, either to be a sanctioned user or for an individual meeting, if they had some of those other needs, then they would pay those fees.
For the room reservation, yes.
Okay.
Could it say $200 per year? Would that be further clear?
Well, the way it's set, I just want to go down to the bottom, would be, the idea would be $200 for every 2 years because you're a sanctioned user for a 2-year period of time.
So-
Which if you use the room once per month for 2 years, it's like $8 a use.
Right. Okay. Okay.
I suppose it wouldn't be harm in putting that on the fee schedule, because the fee schedule is the thing that can always be updated, right? Yeah.
Thank you again, Ms. Bishop, for dealing with all of this.
You've been thinking about it so much, and we're all trying to make sure
I'm
we're
trying to get you
understanding
guys
it.
in my brain here.
Okay, so I guess we've got a couple of ideas floating around, so I will try to propose an amendment here, and I guess I don't know how to do the language, but I guess my proposed amendment would be to revise this draft policy so that the sanctioned user applications are reviewed and approved by the city manager or his designee, rather on a 2-year basis.
City, is saying city staff enough? Or,
I'm fine with saying city staff, I'm just saying would not have to come to council, I guess, is what I'm trying to clarify. Dan, do you have a?
Well, the previous policy had the city manager making that initial decision and then appeals going to the council. I personally like that mechanism if you are going to identify someone in staff that has the authority. I would be inclined to state, rather than staff generally, the CEO, the director, the city manager.
And does he have the implicit authority to delegate, or would we need to say, or his designee?
Yeah, you probably say,
their
or his designee. I think the other obvious party would be the clerk because of all of the calendars and everything that are kept in that office. But I think the city manager, its designee, is probably appropriate if you're going to go that direction.
Okay, so I don't know where
It's
exactly
on-
that fits in the document.
It's on B, where it says sanctioned users are any group, organization, or individual who have been approved by the city council. That would be stricken.
What page are you on?
B, 5.
Page 5. So yeah, I think anywhere regarding sanctioned users where it says approval by city council, you just strike and replace with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Say
I got
approved
it.
by the city manager.
Yeah,
So
and it's in
that,
the
so I'll
second
make a
paragraph, too.
motion to revise the document anywhere that it refers to approval by the city council and change that to approval by the city manager or designee.
Second.
Okay, motion by Ms. Curler, second by Mr. Waters. Does everybody kind of understand the amendment? Any discussion? Okay, can we have a roll call, please, on amending the document to change the approval to the, from the city council to be by the city manager or designee?
Mr. Fields,
Hi.
Ms. Curler,
Aye.
Mr. Waters,
Aye.
Mrs. Bishop,
Aye.
Ms. Quidnow.
Hi.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, thank you. So then I'll make another motion then on the fee schedule, that I would propose that for the sanctioned user application fee, it would be $50 for a 501c3 nonprofit organization and $200 for all other applicants.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Curler, second by Mr. Waters. Any discussion on that one? Ms. Bishop?
Yeah, I think my concern lies in two parts. The first is just overall simplicity of the application of the policy. And when you start splitting up different types of users, you know, it's like, where do you draw the line? So 501c3 is just one example. And we can get into all other types of discussions. So that's one piece. The second piece is a perceived unfairness, in that by the time you go through the process as an organization of being a 501c3, typically it's a very long process. It's drawn out because you have both state and federal requirements that you're trying to meet. Most people don't do it on their own. Most people hire an attorney to do it. And so there's an upstart cost there that typically larger organizations would take advantage of and have that capital to do. We use the example of the Red Cross being a 501c3 and maybe getting the benefit of a reduced application fee, but they're the very organization that comes in, they use the building facility for a whole day, a long period of time. Not to point them out, but those types of users do just incur, again, more use, more wear and tear on the building, and other issues that crop up because of their type of use. And we're granting them a benefit that a smaller organization that can also do a lot of good for the community doesn't have the capital to pay. And so in some ways, you're penalizing a larger organization that could afford it at the expense of a smaller organization that can't. So if we want to reduce the overall fee for all sanctioned users, I would be amenable to that. But to give a leg up to an organization that likely has the capital to pay the fee in the first place, I don't generally support that.
Thank you, and I really appreciate that perspective and how you're thinking about it. I'm not sure I agree that there's an inherent unfairness. I mean, I think Lisa's book club has no interest in becoming a 501c3, and we'll just pay the $200 if we want to use it for $8 a time for a couple of years. So people can, a group can choose whether they want to be a 501c3. We're not expecting them to. I'm trying to think about the organizations who have regularly been using our building and are arguably providing a community benefit, such as a blood drive, even though, yes, they are impacting the buildings and, causing maintenance costs and things like that. So I'm just trying to think about how we would balance all of that. I think I'm also trying to think about what's going to happen the first time the people who are currently on our Class B list learn about this new policy and $200 when they're accustomed to not paying anything, and what kind of feedback are we going to get from that? So just trying to think through, how to support the civic and nonprofit organizations that have already been using the building regularly.
Yes.
I just find it interesting that we would be more concerned about a large national organization that can absolutely afford the fee and their concerns as opposed to a smaller organization that could still do good for the community and may not have that capital. I would rather focus on allowing the users here who reside here, who want to do good here, and giving them the same capacity and putting them on an equal footing with such a larger organization.
So let me give another example, Rock Lake Improvement Association or Lake Mills Rotary. Those are local organizations. They're not, the large national like the American Red Cross. So, I think, I'm trying to keep it simple. So not, that's part of where I think we all felt like the current policy falls short is, how do you define what's a local organization, what's a civic organization? So I think we're trying to be just straightforward and keep it simple. So I really like that about this change. I think there are some local nonprofits that will be impacted by this change in policy and be surprised by the fee, so.
Question. Do they have to be legally identified as a nonprofit, or do they need to be considered a nonprofit? Because when I'm hearing you say nonprofit is different than the indication of the 501c3, that it sounds to me like we're talking about a fee structure for similar things, but not the same. I'm kind of confused. If you wanted, Lisa, if you wanted to have our local nonprofit pay $200 for every 2 years, or if you're saying that our local nonprofit pay $50 for every 2 years.
Sorry, I was probably using the term nonprofit in conversation more casually,
Sure.
but my proposed amendment is a $50 fee for a 501c3 organization. I didn't specify
No,
whether it's local or not.
I think I was just confused by the conversation.
So it would be a 501c3, organization that has officially gone through that process, has the bylaws, and is organized as a nonprofit
Okay.
under the IRS law. So
Okay.
that's whether they are part of a national organization or whether they're a local organization. It would just, the lower fee would be based on that tax category. That's my proposed amendment. Does that help?
It does help clarify. I'm wondering if some of the hesitancy of Ms. Bishop, maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, but for me, going from 200 to 50 seems pretty extreme. I'm of the opinion that maybe 100, just to make life, easy, because it's then not so extreme, but it's still less.
Well, I made my proposal for 50 based on the fact that we have many existing users that are accustomed to paying $0.
Right.
And so I'm trying to recognize that and their long-time use here by giving them a little bit of a break if they are a nonprofit organization, if they are a 501c3 organization.
Right.
Any other discussion on this? Okay, so let's have a roll call vote on the proposed amendment to revise the sanctioned user application fee so that it would be $50 for a 501c3 organization and $200 for all other applicants.
Ms. Curler,
Aye.
Mr. Waters,
Aye.
Mrs. Bishop,
No.
Ms. Quidno,
No.
Mr. Fields,
No.
motion fails.
Okay, so we have a document that's been amended to increase the fees for non-residents and to authorize the city manager to make the approvals for the sanctioned users list. Is there any other discussion or amendments?
There's just on page 6, towards the bottom. It goes from A to C in section 6. So probably need to just relabel those going down. Probably B got X'd at some point.
Schwacked. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Waters.
So just updating the numbering there. That would be that
Oh, I see.
Scrivener's error, that attorney.
Other than that, I'm good with moving forward with the vote tonight.
Okay, would you
Do
like
you
to
wanna
make a
do-
motion?
Are we good with that, or did you want to make those revisions and come back next meeting?
I saw a couple of you looking at me. I think we're okay passing the resolution with these amendments tonight. My question for Mrs. Culler, based on that, is what I would like to have happen and requesting is that this just go back to staff for those final updates, like adding the room photos, fixing the appendices, that type of thing. I don't know that I need to do that. I'm happy to. I would prefer not to, but just if Ms. Curler, you can let me know how we proceed after the vote with fixing this up.
So we don't have a prepared motion, so I think any council member can make a motion that we adopt this policy as it's been amended from our discussion. And if Attorney Drescher has no objections, I'm assuming that any Scrivener's errors and filling in the appendix numbers and things like that can be done by staff after this is adopted.
And then the kind of final thing would be like creating the application for the user. I would see that more as a staff function because I don't know what information they're.
Creating the forms and so forth, sure, that would be administrative. Yeah, I think so too.
So I'll motion to approve the City of Lake Mills Municipal Building Room Rental Policy and Procedures dated July 2023.
I'll second.
Motion by Mr. Waters, second by Mr. Fields. And just for a point of clarification, so that's with the amendments that we made this evening.
Correct.
Okay. Mr. Fields, that's your understanding as well? Okay. Any other discussion
The
on?
two that were approved, I guess.
Yep, the two that were approved, yeah.
Yep.
Any other discussion or comments? Okay, can we have a roll call on the revised municipal building room rental policy that we reviewed tonight with the two amendments that were approved?
Mr. Waters?
Aye.
Mrs. Bishop?
Aye.
Ms. Quidnow?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Phew. Mr. Waters.
Kind of a point of order. I think the meeting's getting late. I see we have one person in attendance that's on the agenda at the bottom. Can we move that up? That would be the electrical.
Can we wrap up this one?
Oh, did we not wrap it up?
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to make sure we had closure on the last one, yeah, but I would be happy to
Oh, I thought we did.
consider revising the agenda, or moving up an item on the agenda, thanks. Okay. All right, so that policy is adopted, and then Attorney Drescher, you can, or staff can work to make those updates that Mrs. Bishop had spoken about. Okay, great, yes, so we do have a few other items, and one of them, the electric utility cost service study. We have a representative from WPPI here. So we have several people that are hanging around till the end for a couple of items here. But why don't we move ahead to item K, which is Resolution 23-51, Electrical Utility Cost of Service Study. And Misty, could you read that title, please?
City Council Resolution 23-51, authorizing city manager to submit an electric utility rate case to the Public Service Commission.
Okay, is there a motion?
I move to approve City Council Resolution 23-51, authorizing the city manager to submit an electric utility rate case to the Public Service Commission.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Quidnow, second by Mr. Waters. Okay, and I'm sorry I forgot your name. So Dwayne, do you want to maybe do some introductions for this presentation?
Nicole Gold from WPPI is here to present the information on the cost of service study for the electric utility.
Thank you, and thank you for your patience.
Yeah, we'll go through this as quickly as possible. I'll just try to touch on the key key points of this. Basically, we would file the electric application on behalf of the utility. The process will probably take 6 to 12 months at the Public Service Commission, the review process. The hearing is now done through a Zoom meeting. That's a little bit different. An effective date is lined up with your meter reads. So overall, the utility, based on their operation and maintenance expenses, we're anticipating the need for a 3.69% increase, or $320,445. That is to earn a fair margin of 7%. There's no one project that's driving this. This is really just your operation and maintenance expenses, inflationary increases. And keep in mind, your last rate increase was over 8 years ago. At that time, we had requested close for 14%. There were 2 certificates of authorities. One was the construction of the utility building. The other was to expand your 24/9 lines. So there were 2 CAs or certificates of authority that were in process. So 3.69%, you haven't had a rate change in over 8 years. It's better to do the small increases over shorter periods of time than be hit later with a large increase to the utility. We take into account many factors in terms of rate design. We look at your cost of service study. We look at the impact to individual customer bills. We look at how you compare to the investor-owned utilities. I'm going through this really fast, so if I'm missing anything key, just holler, but.
What page are you on, Nicole?
Yeah, okay. So if we look directly at the cost of service, we would be increasing residential over 7%. We're not proposing to do that. We scaled it back. Residential customer rate class goes up 4.1%. The average customer uses 615 kilowatt hours. They'd see a $3.68 increase of their bill, or 4.1%. Your average commercial customer uses 1,765 kilowatt hours. They would see an increase of 1,688, or 7.2%. And really, that's due to the cost of service study. We see that general service should bear a little bit larger increase. If we look at your comparison to the closest investor-owned utility, which is WEBCO, your rates are over 19% lower than what WEBCO is at. Their base rates last went into effect in January 1 of 2023. I did include in there, this was based on the Public Works Board's recommendation, a quick look at how you compare to other neighboring municipal-owned utilities. So that's included in your packet for comparison purposes. Let's see. In terms of rate design, one of the things that we did do was we tried for your larger industrial customers, we tried to put the majority of the increase in their demand charges. This is something that customers have more control over their demand use, and they can work with our energy service manager to try to identify ways to bring their demand down and hopefully lower their cost with the impact of this increase. A reminder that your PCAC gets reset to 0 at the time of the rate change. So that's where done through the U factor, which is your base cost of power. So that is something that would be reset with the rate application process. Overall, there was the last time I presented here was in 2021, and we looked at some key things to note about your distribution system. Forrester did a really nice job with a presentation. You're poised for growth with your electric system right now. You could use a good industrial customer to come in to help burden that. Is that in the cards? I don't know. We do offer new load market pricing. That's a tariff that you might be interested for economic development rate. But you're poised for growth, and your system has been built. Other utilities that are coming in now, needing to do a substation, are seeing that transformers are 2 to 3 times the cost. The lead times are significantly longer. So you're poised for growth, and you're in a good position. You have a great asset with a 40 to 60-year life, and you're allowed to earn a return on that asset. So at this point in time, so your filing is a 2023 test year. I have your data loaded in there through the end of 2022. We have to physically file this application before August 1st to be considered for a 2023 test year. If you delay, it means we have to start from scratch with your rate application. We would rather not do that. We'd like to keep things moving. And we have permission from the PSC. They have a new web portal system where applications are being loaded through this web portal. They've allowed us to submit this as a PDF because of some factors with your rate design. So I do have permission from the PSC to file it tomorrow. So, were there any questions that anyone had? I know that was like very high-level overview of everything, but.
Thank you, Nicole. And you did have some PowerPoint slides that we were able to review before the meeting and follow along as you were talking as well. Does anyone have any questions or comments for Nicole?
So, Nicole, the rate summary for single-phase residential was 10 to, now it's going up to 13. What does the commercial, I was just briefly going through here, commercially, does that change as well?
Yep, the commercial customers, at this time, we have them going from, for a single-phase customer, from $10 to $17. And again, this has to do with we unbundle the rate to see the cost of those specific customers. And it's actually significantly larger. If we look at a residential customer, the unbundled rate is actually closer to $40. We're proposing to take that customer charge from $10 to $13. But yes, general service goes from 10 and we're proposing 17. Keep in mind, these are just proposals. The Public Service Commission ultimately determines the rates.
Okay, I see it down below. Thank you.
And I know this item was discussed at the Public Works Board. Did they recommend approval of this? We don't have an official resolution from them, but.
There should have been. It was.
I mean, I don't think it was a written
It was passed. Everybody voted positive.
Okay. The vote was 4-0, and there was one member absent.
Okay.
And that would be at the July 11th meeting.
Great.
Just one question. There were 2 members missing that?
Right.
Oh, okay.
There were
But it was passed
2 members missing
I'm
that?
sorry, 2. Yep.
Thank you.
But there was a
Thank you.
recommended, the Public Works Board recommended approval of this.
They
proposed
did,
that.
and I believe Dan and I are looking to see if there was a written motion or not.
Mrs. Bishop.
Ms. Gold, thank you for being here and lasting through the evening. With the, well, I had a couple of questions. Let me get to the first one. You mentioned the lead time and cost for transformers specifically, so I'm going to use that as an example. How would increasing the rate today on our customers mitigate the problems that you just described with lead times and increased costs when we need to update our infrastructure?
Your infrastructure is sufficient. There's no significant projects that are planned at this time. So you're keeping up with inflationary increases. And again, you're doing a small increase rather than a large one when a project comes up. So you're keeping up.
I did have a second follow-up question. Okay, so along those lines, I see on your slide 4, line 18, we have a net operating income of almost $500,000. How are we using that year to year?
So it covers the cost of your labor, the cost of your distribution lines.
Well,
I mean,
those are operating expenses, and after
Correct.
those operating expenses, we're showing a net operating income after expenses.
Yes.
Okay, so how is that income being used after expenses are paid?
Are you referring to the
So
$526,697?
our goal is not to make too much money for the utility, but we also don't want the utility operating at a loss. So you're investing in a fixed asset, which is your distribution system. The utility is allowed to earn a margin on that asset. And currently, the Public Service Commission is authorizing anywhere from 5% to 7% for a rate of return. Now, for investor-owned utilities, that's a much larger margin that they're authorized to earn. So how the utility uses that margin, that's their discretion, but they have every right to earn money on that asset.
Okay, and the taxpayers have a right to keep their money as well. So I'll go back to my question. At the end of the year, when there's $526,000 sitting in the bank account, how is that money used?
That's outside of my scope for this particular application.
So Catherine, we could dig into that more. I think there are a number of operating expenses that happen every year. There are a number of other projects that come in that aren't necessarily in a CA, a large CA or a construction.
You might have an emergency situation as well where a repair needs to be needed. So you want to make sure that financially the utility is sound.
And there are projects that happen, let's just say a development. There are costs that the utility has to incur in order to construct, say there's a development. Some of those costs are paid by the developer, but some of those costs are not and are built into the rate case. And so the utility upfronts some of those costs from
Right,
year
and
to year.
I understand you have to have some money in the bank account for forward operating costs. I get that. So
The other thing to keep in mind is the Public Service Commission also, this is just what we're requesting. The Public Service Commission reviews this entire process. There's a financial analyst that's assigned to the case that specifically looks at your debt equity ratio and what you should be allowed to earn for a rate of return based on the Standard & Poor's Index. You also have a rate analyst who goes through and determines, is the forecast reasonable? Is what you're anticipating for purchase power reasonable? And finally, you also have an auditor who goes through and scrutinizes all of your O&M accounts into detail. So rest assured, this process will be scrutinized, and in the end, you will be given the fair amount that the utility should earn. This happened with your last rate case. We requested closer to 14%. You received 11% as an overall increase. So this is a very conservative estimate going in, and I would say a fair approach that's taken by many municipals.
I think Sam is online, but the way I understood this from the Public Works meeting is the goal is at 7%. And when you take that net profit and subtract that from the goal, that's where you get the rate increase that's being requested to achieve that 7%. Sam, do you have any additional thoughts there?
with being from home and not having any paperwork in front of me, I don't know if Dwayne would be able to help out a little bit with this.
I would believe that Greg has that statement correct. It's the separation, it's the subtraction of the two. Nicole?
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
So I understand that the 7% is the goal that we're trying to achieve.
Yes, correct.
So when you take that net profit of 526,000, subtract that from the goal, that nets out to the 320 that's being requested as a rate increase?
Correct.
Okay. Just to make sure we're on the same
And
page.
also another thing to point out, when we put in your estimates for your O&M expenses, we literally based it off of your three-year historical average, which are your last audited years, which would be 2020, 2021, and 2022. So your three-year average based on that, and we only factored in 2.6% for inflation. I don't know about you, but I know you have a water case that's right after this, and they're being allowed 8% for inflation. So I think it's a very conservative approach that we're entering into.
And to add on to that comment, if you recall, even our asphalt bids were in the 30% increase range this year. So costs are increasing, as we all know.
Are there any other questions or comments on this item? Okay, if not, can we have a roll call, please, on Resolution 23-51, the electric utility cost of service study?
Mrs. Bishop,
No.
Ms. Quidnow,
Aye.
Mr. Fields,
Hi.
Ms. Curler,
Aye.
Mr. Waters.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-1.
Okay, thank
Was
you
there a
very much
motion
for
to
being
approve?
here. Yes,
There was? Okay.
Michelle made it and you seconded it.
Okay, just want to
Yeah.
double check. It's getting
I think I
late.
have a note
Getting
on
late.
that, so yes. Okay, well, somebody's going to have to stay late no matter what order we do on the agenda here. But since we're talking about cost of service studies, why don't we move to item L, which is Resolution 23-52.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you.
So we'll move to item L. Misty, can you read that title, please?
City Council Resolution 23-52, authorizing the city manager to submit a simplified water rate case to the Public Service Commission.
Is there a motion, please?
I move to approve City Council Resolution 23-52, authorizing the city manager to submit a simplified water rate case to the Public Service Commission.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Quinn, second by Mr. Fields. Okay, is it Dwayne, are you able to speak to this one, or who is?
I think I'm here to do that. I did reach out to Mr. Cameron earlier today to clarify. He did have another meeting tonight, and I believe that Mr. Daly was planning on taking this topic, but I will try to recap what Mr. Cameron presented at the Public Works Board meeting. And so you have his presentation in your packet, as well as the resolution. The proposal is for an 8% simplified rate increase. And so the difference in this one is, this is the PSC's way to create a inflation factor for rate increases. And with the simplified rate increases, basically a very small document, very small time consumption of not only staff, but also of Ellers, who is the cost of service study provider. Simplified rate cases are exactly what they are, simplified, and they are for cost of inflation. Typically, in the past, these have been in the range of 3%. This year, because of the high inflation in the last 2 years, this year it is at 8%. That is not a negotiable percent. It's, if you apply, it's 8%. That was approved by PSC already. similar, I believe in the similar August deadline. Once we move into the next year, potentially, obviously, they'll be changing that number based on what the PSC feels that inflation factor should be. A few things on the residential cost. What does that mean? It's on an average uses of 3,250 gallons per month. It is $3.35 per month. So that 8%, while sounds large, and I'm not discounting the increase. Don't get me wrong, but comparable units of the utilities, the water cost is relatively low. So when we're talking about a high percentage, it's actually a lower dollar value than maybe some of the other utilities. I'm not discounting how that it is a dollar amount, but it's $3.35.
Is that
for
the
8%.
average?
Pardon?
Is that like the average?
That would be an average residential user.
Okay.
Yep. And I believe that was on page 13. So I kind of jumped around a little bit on there. So the cost of, I'm going to go to their report a little bit now. Their report and key to page 10, they are showing their projections of increases over the life of the capital improvement plan. And they are proposing this simplified rate increase in this year at 8%. Over the course of the capital improvement plan, the next projected rate increase is 2026. Now, they would, I believe, and they said it during the presentation, was that if a utility can get a simplified rate increase just from the cost perspective to apply, from the standpoint of not having to go through the full-fledged rate increase like on the electric side was just contemplated. Again, they're showing an 8% increase in 2026. They're saying that if the simplified is still at 8%, that would cover that year and the rest of the capital improvement plan. Is there any other questions or any other parts that we can bring? Yes, Greg.
And this was recommended by Public Works Board as well, 4-0 vote.
Correct. And to answer the question earlier, both of these were not written documents at the Public Works Board. They were motions made at the meeting.
Great. Thank you for that. Okay, any questions or discussion on this agenda item? Is that a hand up? Mrs. Bishop?
We're running late. I'm going to say one thing. There's a lot of red on this page, and it seems like at first glance, that our water utility is not taking in a net operating revenue after expenses for most of these years. I have never lived in a place, and I have moved 17 years in my adult life and lived in about 5 regions. I've never lived in a place with utilities so expensive. Okay, and looking at some of the documents provided, going back to the the electric utility, we are in the top expense for most of those utilities listed. What are we doing that our operation is so expensive? And that's a conversation for a much different day, much longer conversation. But we really need to look at that because we haven't even talked about a wastewater treatment plant, upgrades to facilities, sinking, our electric lines and what that would cost, what those transformers look like, and getting those updated materials. So I just have significant concerns with this rate increases, particularly in this economy when the average wage is worse than it was in the pandemic. So those are my concerns generally for these last 2 items, and I'll leave it at that for tonight. Thank you.
Mr. Waters?
Nicole, I can probably look this up or Google this up, but I made a comment at the Public Works. I did a Google search when we were talking about this topic, and it seems like it was a 7. Lake Mills was, do you recall the number? You had asked the question.
Yeah.
I can Google it.
We're like 7.4% below the Wisconsin.
The Wisconsin average on electrical. just to put that in perspective, I guess.
So
I
do we
can
have
try to
something like
Google
that
it
for
real quick.
water? Do we have an understanding of something like that for water? Sounds like you're saying, Mrs. Bishop, your perception is that we're higher.
Well, in the comparisons that we were provided, this goes back to the electrical vote. But I mean, if you just look across the board, I mean, $10, $10, $10, $10, it's only a few of us that are charging at that rate compared to the majority of that list. So again, that was a previous vote, previous issue, but by way of example.
Okay, that's what I was trying to understand, if there was something that we had to look at related to water, but I didn't see anything in our packet.
If I may, I know they weren't included in the packet, but we could reference a number of deep dives that Paul had the Public Works Board do over the years that might provide some of that comparison. And again, as Ms. Bishop said, further in-depth on both of these over time is likely warranted.
Mr. Waters?
So in the electric, the Google search says that Lake Mills is 7.43 less than the Wisconsin average rate. But we are 2.78 greater than the national average, to put that in perspective. I'll see if I can get something on water.
I was gonna say the PSC on wisconsin.gov gives you an opportunity to compare electric residential monthly bill comparison. They also allow you to do water bill comparison. I'm trying to navigate it while y'all are talking, but as far as I can tell, and it does give you an option of select a month and a year, so you can look and see how it's been since, let's say, COVID versus right now. It also allows you to select privately owned utilities too. So there are tools out there for us to be able to compare, but I agree with Ms. Bishop that we should really be digging in and finding out where's our money going and how's it being used. I know that it is going to the capital improvement plan, but I think we need to look into this a little bit more.
And maybe some follow-up on those meetings, when we did do those deep dives, we had to keep in mind that each community and each utility is different. Many communities have larger industries. We are more of a residential community. That can change from utility to utility. And so, as Nicole stated earlier, on the electric side, one large user could change the face of that in a future rate case or evaluation of rates.
So for example, a large water user might take more of the burden of the cost of the water system and would then be able to reduce some of the residential burden.
In the future, yes. So, for example, 15 years ago, the DNR fish hatchery was the largest user in the city. They are no longer. And that was a significant rate that dropped off of a single user and then went to all of the residential customers.
That's because they switched to a well or?
They switched to a line from the lake and
yeah.
then are not using the city water for that use.
So
Now,
that changed the rates for the rest of us then, when
Correct.
that change happened.
Exactly. Now, I agree that both of these utilities, as we move forward, we should continue to review and analyze the dollars. I agree. But when we just do those comparisons, that maybe those are great tools on the PSC site, we have to keep in mind that it's not necessarily always apples to apples.
So that'll be something for a new Public Works Director to work on with us. Okay, is there any other questions or comments on Resolution 23-52? Okay, if not, Ms. Deegan, we have a roll call on Resolution 23-52, Water Utility Cost of Service Study.
Ms. Quidnow,
Aye.
Mr. Fields,
Aye.
Ms. Curler,
Aye.
Mr. Waters,
Aye.
Mrs. Bishop.
No.
Motion passes 4-1.
Okay, thank you. I would note the time, it's 10 after 10. I think by ordinance, we finish at 3.5 hours if we're not done, but I believe we can get finished with this agenda. So hearing, if there's no objection, I'd like to just kind of push forward. Is there
Yes.
any concerns?
Madam President, I will have to be leaving shortly. Could we go straight to item J and leave the remaining items as the recognition of services and the city code chapter?
For after your departure, but we would
Yes,
still.
ma'am.
Okay.
Please.
Sure, yes, we can
Okay.
do letter J. So let's go to that next, Resolution 23-50. Let's see, we have a resolution. Misty, could you read that title, please?
Just one moment. I'm sorry, all the shuffling around. I'm not
Sorry.
seeing-
Sorry, Misty.
Letter J, 23-50.
Resolution 23-50, authorization to borrow funds, 2023 capital improvement plan.
Okay, may I have a motion?
I move to approve Resolution 23-50, authorization to borrow funds for the 2023 capital improvement plan. Checking the boxes paid from existing city fund balance and pay the necessary sum from existing city fund balance.
Second. Second.
Motion by Mrs. Bishop, second by Mr. Fields. Sam, do you have any background or information for us?
Just as I referred in my memo, the remaining capital improvement plan items were unable to be borrowed for due to the lifespan. Anything for geo borrowing has to be 10 years or more. The remaining items that were in the capital improvement plan have a 10-year or less lifespan. So my recommendation is to use fund balance for the remaining balance of $278,400 rather than borrowing at 4.4% interest.
Okay, any further discussion or questions for Sam? Okay, can we have a roll call on Resolution 23-50, authorization to use funds, I guess we would say, for the 2023 capital improvement plan?
Mr. Fields,
Aye.
Ms. Curler,
Aye.
Mr. Waters,
Aye.
Mrs. Bishop,
Aye.
Ms. Quidnow.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to jump around again, and I'd like to go next to letter M, which is ordinance 1255, amending the city code chapter 279. Let's see, so this is the first reading. So Misty, can I have you read that ordinance title for us, please?
Ordinance 1255, amending City Code Chapter 279, Building Construction, Article 1, Uniform Building Code, Section 279-3, Adoption of Commercial Building Code, Section 279-6, Building Inspector, and Section 279-24, Violations and Penalties.
Okay, so we don't need a motion tonight. This is just our first reading, but we do have Troy here who has waited over 3 hours to talk with us about this. And I know, Troy, that we also have a document from you. So do you want to come up to the podium and tell us a little more about this ordinance?
Good evening. So, quick little backstory, I guess, is 4 or 5 years ago, the state required all municipalities to delegate somebody to do building inspection or plan review in their municipality. We did that as a city when I worked for an outside contractor. 3-4 months ago, when I was hired here full-time, I contacted the state to change the delegation to myself here at the city. At that time, the lady who runs the delegation department up there, Etta, asked us to update our ordinance to add the camping units, which was, I think it's 327. And in doing so, Dan found a few, I guess we'll call it archaic verbiage in some of the ordinances and did an awesome job of bringing it up to I think it was a better read for everybody, and it added what the state is requiring us to do to keep me on as a delegated building inspector. Really, the options are if you don't do it, they come in and they can take over as the inspector and issue permits if we don't have somebody delegated in the municipality. So we kind of got to play by their rules a little bit, but by you guys having me on as a staff, you guys kind of get to control how that works anyway, so. And I at the last minute, I was on their state website, and those camping units, the city doesn't have anything like that, and there's nothing in the near future where we're gonna be using this. So, Dan and I kind of contemplated, do we really need to do this, or should we do this? But we thought, we're gonna make a couple of changes anyway, so why not add it on there? Doesn't hurt anything, so.
Okay, so it sounds like there's some sort of housekeeping changes as well as adopting the SPS 327
Correct.
standards. And then that just allows you to do the uniform dwelling code inspections rather than
Absolutely.
the state.
Yep, you got it.
Okay, okay. Any questions or comments for Troy on this one? Okay, so that was the first reading tonight. So that'll be our next agenda for a second reading. So if I have kept up my notes correctly, I think we are to our last item, which is the resolution recognizing the city services of Paul Hermanson. Am I tracking that correctly? Okay.
Best for last.
And I did, I think we all received an email from Paul yesterday or today, and I did check with him, and he indicated that he would not be able to be here, so I don't think it's a problem that we left this till last. But I would like to read the resolution, thinking maybe he'll check in on the video, and we can each say something for him. So I would like to read the resolution to recognize Paul's years of service. So this is Resolution 23-49, in appreciation of public service to the City of Lake Mills from Paul Hermanson. Whereas the City Council of the City of Lake Mills desires to recognize and honor Paul Hermanson for his years of loyal service to the City of Lake Mills and its citizens, and whereas Paul Hermanson has served the city over a 16-year career as a manager and mentor through his valuable talents and expertise and dedication and reliability as the Director of Public Works and Utility Superintendent, and whereas Paul Hermanson has devoted his career to the City of Lake Mills, the Department of Public Works, and its employees by demonstrating loyalty, leadership, compassion, dedication, a keen sense of humor, and a quick wit throughout, and whereas Paul Hermanson's career performance and problem-solving skills have made a meaningful and lasting contribution to the betterment of the City of Lake Mills and the Department of Public Works. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the City Council of the City of Lake Mills does hereby recognize the dedicated public service of Paul Hermanson and extends best wishes for an enjoyable retirement. So can I have a motion for adoption of Resolution 23-49, please?
I move to adopt Resolution 23-49 in appreciation of the public service to the City of Lake Mills from Paul Hermanson.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Quidnow and seconded by Mr. Fields. I don't know if we noted for the records that Mrs. Bishop had to leave, so we're down to 4. So can we have a roll call on that, please, Misty?
Ms. Curler,
Aye.
Mr. Waters,
Aye.
Ms. Quidnow,
Aye.
Mr. Fields.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0.
Thank you, and we probably could have done a show of hands on that. Would anybody like to share some thoughts virtually with Paul? Mr. Waters, yeah.
I did get to say a goodbye to Paul when I attended a College Street meeting that was an update, but I was hoping to have one more last chance at him at a Public Works meeting that got canceled in June, so that was sad that I missed Paul. That was in his last couple days on the job, actually, but I did see his letter where he's planning to do some substitute teaching, and I think that that's perfect for him with his quick wit. I think, and his kind nature, I think the students will really appreciate him, and and it's been an honor to work with him at the city, and just a complete joy. He came well prepared to the meetings, and always kept things light. So it was just wonderful working with him. So thank you, Paul.
Mr. Fields.
Yeah, I'd just like to say thank you, Paul. Enjoy retirement. From his email, it looks like he's going to be playing now at the Badger games and teaching. So good for you that you're taking time to enjoy, stay active. And it was a pleasure working with you on council and also on Public Works for a short period. Thank you.
Yeah, I echo what was said already, that I think that you're going to be an awesome addition to any school district that has you as a substitute. And I think that you're going to bring, definitely bring some great assets to the kids that you will experience. And you'll find you'll learn a little bit from them too, but try to enjoy some downtime in the time that you have in your retirement too.
Paul, I'd like to extend my personal thanks to you. It's been an honor to work with you for the last several years. Some of the things that have impressed me about you are have been your extensive knowledge of a wide breadth of services that the Public Works Department oversees. There's a lot going on there and a lot of different issues to master, and that always impressed me, how you were on top of all of those issues. I also always appreciated your, as Mr. Waters said, your kindness and your compassion to your employees as well as to the citizens. I think you treated the citizens with a great deal of respect and compassion, and I really valued that. I think that has served our community well. I also have always been struck by your humility. I think that was identified in the resolution. There have been a couple of awards that came your way, especially in the last few months, and you really did not want to be recognized. I think you did not want to be here tonight to be recognized. In fact, I believe his words to me in an email were to shine the spotlight on someone else who deserves it. So you do deserve it, Paul, and thank you from the bottom of my heart for your service to the city of Lake Mills. Mr. Dwayne, would you like to say anything this evening, or Dan?
I'll just, it was well said by all of you. I think as Paul's request is that he really wanted it simpler, so I'm just going to stay that way, and I'm going to say congrats, enjoy your retirement, Paul, although it sounds like you're going to be busy still yet on your plate.
I really enjoyed working with Paul. Interesting. He had a lot of knowledge on a lot of topics, always relatable. Definitely a coach at heart. I don't know if you guys know that, but he's a baseball coach, and I know he takes a lot of pride in that. A music lover, definitely could spin a yarn, and really ready with a joke. He's just a delightful presence most of the time. On occasion, he did get quite serious, which was also appreciated. And he certainly will be missed, and just utmost respect, and really do sincerely wish him the best in retirement.
Thank you, everyone, and thanks again, Paul. Wishing you all the best. Okay, so we're done with council business. So we are on to agenda item 10, which is recommendations for future agenda items. So again, we have next week, Monday, July 24th at 5:30 p.m. is our special meeting for action on the updated comprehensive plan. I expect we'll see again, this ordinance 1255 that we just discussed. I believe the capital improvement plan will probably be going to Public Works Board and then to us sometime in the next month. I think there will be some plan commission items. Anything else that staff is aware of that we should be thinking about, or that council members want to mention? Mr. Waters.
I would like to keep I know that EMS is just being implemented with Ryan Brothers, and I'm sure we'll get an update on that in a future meeting. But I'd like to keep that on our radar. I know that the state just passed a budget, and there was funding mechanisms in there for EMS services, And it's something that I think that we should be looking at from a county-wide perspective and having discussions at the county level on where the future of EMS stands within Jefferson County. So I'd like to keep our eye on that, maybe to talk about next steps there and what we should be doing to keep that process moving forward and not just rest on the recent decision that was made. And also, I'd like to revisit some of the written proposals. I think we ran into some issues tonight where the written proposals maybe weren't made at committee level, and maybe that's something we should talk about and address and see if we should return to that type of process.
Okay. Thank you. Any other suggestions? Okay, so item agenda is 11 is convening into closed session. We won't be doing that tonight since our city manager is not here with us. So that applies to 11 and 12. We won't take any action, and I'll go to item 13 and we'll adjourn this meeting. Thank you, everyone.